The air in the departure chamber smelled like ozone and antiseptic sweat. Ethan Vale stood on the circular platform, his knuckles white as he gripped the railing. The massive clock tower visible through the reinforced glass above was ticking down the final seconds of his 18th year. Around him, hundreds of other 18-year-olds were being whisked away by swirling vortexes of light, their screams cut short the moment they crossed the threshold. There were no exceptions. No one stayed behind. Not even those who begged. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wasn't strong. He wasn't talented. But he was ready. Or he hoped he was. The clock struck midnight. The floor dropped out from under his reality. Gravity twisted into a nauseating spiral of gray static. Ethan reached for the memory of his training manuals. The rules etched into his mind since childhood, trying to anchor himself as the world dissolved into chaos. 3 days earlier, Ethan checked his knife for the 100th time that morning. The blade was duller than he liked, but it was sharp enough to cut through most common monster hides in New Eden if you knew where to strike. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the starter pack, sitting neatly in the corner of his small apartment. It looked deceptively simple. A canvas bag filled with 7 days of dried rations, a thin tunic, a pair of reinforced boots, a metal water canteen, and a basic medical kit. "You're overthinking it," said Marcus Ren, leaning against the doorframe. Marcus was tall, broad-shouldered, and naturally gifted with what the trial coaches called minor strength enhancement. It made him popular in high school sparring clubs. He looked at Ethan's meticulously organized gear with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You've spent 3 years studying trial history like it's going to save you. But the trial doesn't care about your books, Ethan. It cares about muscle and reflexes." Ethan didn't look up. He adjusted the strap of his pack. "Trial history isn't just books, Marcus. It's patterns. I know which monsters attack in the first week. I know how the magic cycles in different regions. You have strength. Good for you. But when a level 2 grizzly bear charges you, does it care about your biceps?" Marcus laughed, stepping into the room and picking up one of Ethan's printed maps. "It cares if I punch its face in. It cares that you're slow," Ethan countered calmly, "and predictable. The trial coaches say 80% of first-year fatalities are caused by rookies trying to fight things they don't understand because their gift convinced them they were invincible. Remember last year? Sarah got fire magic. She thought she was a wizard. A Wolfmane pack took her down in 2 hours. She couldn't even feel the heat because she was too busy casting flames." Marcus's smirk faded slightly. He put the map back down.
"Sarah died? That fast? Inefficiently."
He stood up, slinging the bag over his shoulder.
"I didn't get a flashy gift. I got perfect memory and animal communication. Useful for hunting, maybe, not for fighting."
"Animal communication?" Marcus shook his head, laughing again, though it was nervous now.
"You can talk to rats? Great. What are you going to do, convince a rat not to eat you? I can ask them where the predators are, and I can remember every word every survivor has ever written down in the databases. I know the rules inside out. 1 starter pack, 1 random gift, 1 objective. Survive 365 days.
Hey, don't forget.
Clapping a heavy hand on Ethan's shoulder.
New Eden is supposed to be safe. The first settlement. Plenty of people there. You'll blend in. Safe is relative.
He looked at the clock on his wall. 4 hours until midnight.
The database says New Eden has a population density of 3,000 survivors in the first month. Competition for resources will be insane.
So you're going to hide?
Raising an eyebrow.
I'm going to prepare.
Ethan corrected. He walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. The departure towers were already humming with energy, glowing bright blue against the twilight sky. My gift might seem useless compared to sword mastery or healing, but knowledge is the only thing that doesn't fade when you're starving. Marcus sighed, walking over to stand beside him.
I guess I'll see you in hell then? Or heaven, depending on how the trial coaches distribute their points? I don't believe in heaven, and I'm trying really hard not to go to hell. Fair enough.
Marcus grinned, that confident, annoying grin.
Just try to stay alive long enough for me to save you later, okay? Don't die first. I'll need someone to complain to about the food rations.
They stood in silence for a moment, two friends watching the world turn upside down. Then Marcus turned and walked toward the door. "See you on day one, Ethan?" "Day one," Ethan echoed. He watched Marcus leave, then looked back at his starter pack. He opened it, taking out the knife again. He ran his thumb along Ethan's thumb along the edge of the steel, checking for nicks he'd missed.
Hey,
His silhouette blocking the hallway light.
you forgot your boots.
Ethan looked down. The reinforced boots sat laced and ready by the door. He had tied them twice already. "I have them. You checked them 3 times in the last hour. You're vibrating? I'm cold. You're not cold. You're scared of being useless." Marcus stepped back into the room, kicking the leg of Ethan's desk lightly. It wobbled. He hated it when things were too tidy. "Look, I know you think my gift is just minor strength enhancement. But look at me. Really look." Ethan glanced up, meeting Marcus's eyes. They were bright, confident, alive. "You have the strength of a man who lifts weights twice a week and believes in himself." "Damn right," Marcus grinned. He pulled up his sleeve, revealing a bicep that strained against his shirt.
When I get there, I'm not hiding in a hole with your rats. I'm taking point. You follow my lead. If something big comes out of the bushes, you let me hit it while you figure out where the rest are. And if you get swarmed?"
His voice was flat. He recited from memory. "Incident Report 44B, single target combatants are vulnerable to pack tactics. Isolation guarantees death." Marcus waved a hand dismissively.
"Then you talk them away. Or run. I'll hold the line long enough."
Ethan didn't answer. He turned back to the window. The sky was darkening, but the departure towers were already blazing with white light. Thousands of pillars of energy pierced the clouds, pulling people upward into the void.
There's no such thing as a long enough line in the trial, Marcus. It only takes one mistake. Then I'll make fewer mistakes than you.
He reached out and grabbed Ethan's shoulder again, spinning him around.
"You listen to me. You are not dying. You hear me? You have that weird brain of yours. You read every file, every journal, every diary from the last 2,000 years. You know how this works better than anyone. And I have fists. We balance each other out. I don't need balancing.
Pulling away gently.
I need survival. Same thing."
Marcus insisted. He checked his own pack, slinging it over one shoulder with effortless grace. His starter pack looked identical to Ethan's canvas, drab, unassuming, but where Ethan's was packed with calculated precision, Marcus's swung loosely, heavy with the implied weight of confidence. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't go looking for New Eden right away." Ethan paused. The database records were clear on this. New Eden. Designated safe zone. Before we get into the story, do me a quick favor. Like this video, subscribe, and comment what story you want to see next. Now, let's begin. Population cap, 3,000. Resource strain, critical within 14 days. But the narrative in the popular histories often skipped the first month entirely. The objective is to survive. Staying away from known resources increases risk. Staying near 3,000 desperate people with no food and no water guarantees conflict, Marcus countered. He moved to the door, hand on the frame. "My brother went out 5 years ago. He got sword mastery. Flashy, right? Everyone thought he'd be a king. What do you know what happened to him?" Ethan closed his eyes. He could retrieve the file instantly. Subject: Marcus Ren's elder brother. Gift: sword mastery. Fate: died day 12. Cause: betrayal by fellow survivor in New Eden perimeter dispute.
He was killed by a former Lily, exactly.
His voice dropping an octave.
New Eden isn't a sanctuary. It's a trap. Everyone goes there because it's the logical first step. That's why everyone dies there in the first month. The trial doesn't want you safe. It wants you crowded. So where do I go?
Ethan asked. He wasn't asking for advice. He was testing Marcus's knowledge against his own data. If not New Eden, then where? Marcus shrugged, but his eyes were hard now. Gone was the playful senior. In his place was someone who had already calculated a worst-case scenario and decided to bet against it.
I don't know.
That's why I'm leaving it open. But I know you won't go straight for the settlement. You're too smart for that. You'll look at the maps, see the danger zones, and head into the wilds.
Just don't trust your eyes, Ethan. Your perfect memory remembers what should be there. It doesn't always remember what is.
Ethan frowned.
That's vague. The trial is vague.
He opened the door. The hallway was empty now. Most of the apartment block had evacuated hours ago. Only the late complainers and the obsessed remained.
Come on, we need to get to the gathering point before the locks engage. If we're not at the center platform when the chime hits, we don't go. I know the schedule.
Picking up his knife from the table, he slid it into its sheath on his belt. The click was satisfyingly solid. Center platform is optimal for initial distribution radius. It reduces travel time to neutral ground by 40%. See? You're already doing it. Ethan slung his pack over his shoulder, the weight familiar and grounding. If I'm wrong about the distribution radius, I'll walk. If I'm right, I save energy I can't spare later. Marcus shook his head, stepping into the hallway. You're impossible. But fine. You walk your path. Just remember, maps don't bleed. People do. They moved out together, the apartment door clicking shut behind them. The corridor was silent, stripped of life. Their neighbors had already departed or were waiting in their respective towers. Ethan checked his watch. 3 hours, 42 minutes. Downstairs, the street was a river of gray uniforms and anxious faces. Hundreds of 18-year-olds milled about, clutching their starter packs. Some cried. Some laughed nervously. Most just stared at the sky.
Stay close.
Crowds get chaotic when the countdown starts. I know how to move through panic. I've analyzed 1,200 incident reports on crowd crushes during departure days. Panic is predictable if you identify the triggers.
Triggers? A voice cut in. It belonged to a girl with sharp features and wide eyes, standing next to Marcus. She held her pack like a shield.
What triggers them?
Marcus turned,
The chime. And the lights. The girl.
noting her presence, but not slowing his pace.
You're Lena Vance. Your brother was in class of 24. He received magic theory as a gift.
Lena blinked. You know my brother? I know his file, Ethan corrected. He survived 4 years. His data is publicly available in the New Eden archives. He died from dehydration, not monster attack. Hydration strategy is more important than magical output for long-term survival. Lena stared at him, then looked at Marcus.
Is this who you're sticking with? He's efficient.
Shrugging,
And he remembers things I forget. That's valuable. It's creepy.
Lena muttered, but she fell into step beside them anyway. The group of 3 moved toward the central plaza, where massive departure towers spiraled into the clouds. The air hummed with static charge. It made the hair on Ethan's arms stand up.
Why do they make us wear uniform?
Tugging at her gray tunic.
It feels like we're going to execution. We are, just not immediately. Don't say that.
Marcus warned.
Keep it professional. Emotional contagion spreads fast in groups this size.
How do you know that? Lena pressed.
You act like you've seen a departure before. I have.
His voice low.
I watched my brother leave. I watched him come back. Changed. Different. The trial doesn't just take you, it changes the variables of who you are.
Ethan looked at Marcus's profile. The older boy's jaw was tight. You're projecting trauma onto a statistical probability, Marcus. Your brother's outcome is an outlier in the grand data set of survival rates. Outliers keep people awake at night. Marcus shot back. They reached the edge of the plaza. Thousands of people were funneling toward the center platform. The departure towers were 300 meters tall, gleaming silver and blue. At their bases, swirling portals of light pulsed in rhythm with a deep, resonant hum.
Look up. Observe the frequency of the pulse. Are you serious?
Lena asked.
The closer you are to the core, the faster the pulse.
Ethan continued.
It correlates with mana density. High density means higher risk of volatile gifts, but also higher potential for rare ones. So I should aim for the center?
Lena asked.
No, you stay with us. We spread out at the last second to maximize coverage. That's the tactic.
Ethan nodded. Coverage increases probability of finding initial resources by 60% over random dispersion. See? Math works. Marcus grinned, but his eyes were scanning the crowd. He looked for threats, for openings, for anything that wasn't a peer in uniform. The sky darkened. The hum grew louder. People stopped talking. A collective silence fell over the plaza, heavy and suffocating. 10 minutes, a voice boomed from speakers embedded in the towers. The voice was synthetic, emotionless. Prepare for transport. Ethan checked his knife one last time. He ran his thumb along the blade. Sharp, cold, real.
Lena, if we get separated, run north. Towards the tree line. Do not go to New Eden.
But New Eden is the first settlement. It's the first grave. But I agree with your movement vector. North avoids the initial conflict zones near the central hub.
Why are you two so obsessed with running?
Lena asked, her voice trembling.
Maybe some of us want to try fighting. You can't fight a world that wants you dead.
He grabbed Ethan's shoulder.
Ready?
Ethan took a breath. The air tasted like ozone and fear. Born ready. The light intensified. The pulse became a roar. Ethan felt the ground vibrate beneath his boots. He didn't look at the sky. He looked at the space between him and Marcus. One step back, knife in right hand, packed tight.
3 minutes.
The voice intoned. Lena closed her eyes, whispering a prayer to no one. Marcus adjusted his stance, feet shoulder-width apart, fists clenched. Ethan watched the crowd. Are they shaking? Ethan glanced down. His palms were damp but steady.
Tremors indicate a loss of motor control due to adrenaline mismanagement. I have regulated my breathing. You're lying.
Her eyes wide as she clutched her pack straps until her knuckles turned white. Nobody is that calm. We're going to die out there.
That is a 97% success rate if you follow the established protocols. What protocols?
His voice tight.
You know, they're just stories. Folklore made to keep us docile while we wait for our turn.
They are data points, Ethan corrected. And every data point represents a life that ended because someone ignored a rule. The light beneath them flared, blinding and white. The hum pitched up into a shriek. The air pressure dropped instantly, popping ears and making lungs feel thin. Don't blink, Marcus yelled. If you look away during transport, the alignment shifts. You'll land inside a rock wall. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the center of the portal. Alignment is determined by neural mapping. Blinking does not alter magnetic fields. Tell that to the guy in 19 who landed in the swamp, Marcus retorted. He drowned before he could stand up.
The swamp incident was a result of poor gift selection, not blinking.
Ethan argued, but even as he said it, the world twisted. The ground vanished. The sky tore open. Gravity reversed, then doubled, then vanished entirely. He was falling upward into white noise. Then, silence. Ethan hit hard earth. Mud splashed his face. The air smelled of pine needles and ozone. He pushed himself up, coughing. The uniform hung off him, damp with sweat and dirt. He checked his limbs. He checked his pack. He was in a forest. Tall pines stretched toward a gray sky. Birds called in the distance. It was peaceful, Marcus, he called out. No answer. Lena, silence. The white light had faded, leaving only the dull gray of an overcast afternoon. Ethan stood up, brushing mud from his knees. He looked around. No towers, no crowds, just trees, endless, silent trees. He checked his starter pack contents mentally. 7 days of food, basic clothing, a knife, water container, simple medical supplies, and one random gift. He reached inward, probing the strange void where his power lay. He felt nothing. Not a spark. Not a whisper. Just empty space. Great, he muttered. A dud. He turned toward the nearest path. The ground was soft with needle litter. It muffled his steps. Good. He moved quickly, scanning for signs of other departees. Tracks in the mud, broken branches, anything. 10 minutes later, he found a footstep. Fresh, deep boot prints leading north. He followed them. The trees thinned slightly, revealing a clearing ahead. In the center of the clearing stood a stone marker, weathered and covered in moss. Etched into the stone were words, "Welcome to the trial, survive." Ethan approached the marker. There was no one else nearby. The footprints ended at the base of the stone, as if the person had stopped just to look at it, or vanished. He pulled out his knife, holding it loosely in his right hand. He examined the stone. The moss was damp. It had been raining recently. But he hadn't seen clouds break before the transport. "Who were you?" he whispered to the empty air. "And where did you go?" He heard a snap of a twig behind him. Ethan spun, raising the knife. A boy stood 10 meters away, panting heavily. He was younger looking, maybe 15, though his uniform marked him as 18. His face was pale, streaked with tears and dirt. Did you see him?" The boy gasped. "Marcus? Tall guy, dark hair." Ethan lowered the knife slightly.
I saw footprints leading north. Then they stopped at a stone marker.
The boy's eyes widened.
He went north? But Marcus said, wait. You're Ethan Vale, right? From the prep school? How do you know my name?
His voice trembled.
I optimized resources. What is your name? Julian Cross. I'm lost. I don't know what my gift is. I've been trying to activate it for an hour. Nothing happens.
Ethan studied Julian. He was holding a jagged rock like a weapon. "Try to focus on your dominant hand. Does it feel warmer, colder?" Julian closed his eyes. "It feels heavy, like it's full of water." Ethan frowned. "Water suggests fluid manipulation or high-density strength. Try lifting the rock above your head." Julian grunted, struggling to lift the jagged stone. His arms shook. Ethan stood on the platform, the hum of the transfer engine vibrating through the soles of his boots. The air smelled of ozone and recycled sweat. Around him, hundreds of other 18-year-olds fidgeted with their belongings, checking watches, whispering final prayers to gods they weren't sure still listened.
Are you actually going to check your map one more time?
Sarah asked, leaning against the railing beside him. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring down at the swirling vortex of light below the platform. Her fingers were white-knuckled around the strap of her bag.
I don't have a map.
Keeping his voice low so as not to draw attention from the instructors patrolling the perimeter in their gray uniforms, he tapped the pocket where his notebook lay flat against his ribs.
Maps are static. The trial isn't. Everyone has a starter pack.
Finally turning to look at him, her eyes were wide, reflecting the chaotic blue light of the vortex.
They give you a knife, some rations, and a water filter. It's standard procedure for every trial world. Even World 127 had those. World 127 collapsed.
The words felt heavy in his mouth. He hadn't planned to say them so loudly, but the fact hung between them like a stone. The ruins on that world were inhabited by something that ate mana. The starter pack didn't help because the enemy wasn't physical. It was conceptual. Sarah flinched.
Don't say it out loud. You'll jinx it. I'm just stating historical precedent.
He pulled his notebook out slightly, checking the angle in his pocket so no one could read the dense scribbles inside. "Look at the crowd. How many people do you think know what they're walking into? Most of them?" A voice cut in from behind them. It was Jace, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of confident posture that came from years of martial arts training. He slung an arm over Sarah's shoulder, squeezing gently before dropping his hand. "They get a random gift. Everyone knows that. If I get something useful, I'll be fine. If you get nothing, well, that's just bad luck. Random gifts are distributed based on compatibility with the world's mana field," Ethan corrected him, not looking up from his notebook.
It's not a lottery of utility. It's a statistical alignment. Most people get junk. Tools that require skills they don't have, or weapons that drain their stamina too quickly. Then why are you so calm?
Tilting his head,
You look like you're waiting for a bus, not walking to your death.
Ethan closed the notebook and slid it back into his pocket. He looked up at the massive screens above the platform, where the names of previous candidates scrolled by in cold green text. Some names faded out, indicating survival. Others flashed red, indicating failure or death. The ratio was getting worse every year.
Because I've read the records, the trial isn't one world. There are thousands, possibly millions. When someone turns 18, they are assigned to a trial world. Most worlds are relatively new. They contain forests, monsters, ruins, resources, other candidates. Some develop into massive civilizations during the year, others collapse, but there is one world Earth has almost no records about.
Jace laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound that made Sarah jump.
You think you're special because you read books? Ethan, I bench twice my body weight. What are you going to do? Read the monster to sleep? Most people sent to trial worlds expect World 1.
Ignoring Jace's mockery, he kept his eyes on the scrolling names.
They expect a standard fantasy setup. Trees, wolves, maybe a cave of goblins. They prepare for physical threats. But the assignment algorithm doesn't just pick a difficulty level, it picks an ecosystem. And there are anomalies.
Sarah tugged on Jace's sleeve. Jace, stop talking to him. He's right about the records. I saw it in the archives last week. There are gaps. Big ones. In the older files. Old files are corrupted. Jace dismissed her.
Data loss happens. It's not a pattern. It's a pattern if you look at the dates.
He pointed to a section of the screen where the red flashes were concentrated.
Look at this cluster. 3 candidates from the same district, sent in the same cycle, all assigned to World 4. But the feedback logs are empty. No resource reports, no monster sightings, just silence.
Silence means they all died quickly.
Jace said.
Boring outcome. No.
His voice dropped an octave.
Silence means the world didn't record them. Or it recorded them in a format we can't read. There is one world Earth has almost no records about. A place that shouldn't exist.
Where are you going with this?
Her voice tightening. She looked from Ethan to the screen, then back to Ethan. Are you saying you think you're going there?
I'm saying that if I were betting on where the highest mortality rate lies, I'd bet on the places we don't talk about.
He checked his wrist for the 3rd time in a minute. The transfer countdown was at 10 seconds. The world has names. We know World 1. But we rarely mention World 0. World 0? Jace scoffed. That's a myth. A bedtime story for nervous recruits. Jace slapped a hand against the metal railing, the clang echoing over the hum of the crowd.
It's a joke. Some engineer in the algorithm department got bored and added a null value to the code. 0. Nothing. No world exists at coordinate 0. It isn't code.
He didn't look at Jace. He was watching the countdown clock on the central pillar. The numbers were red, ticking down with ruthless precision.
It's an omission. Earth has records for World 1 through World 9402. But between World 1 and World 5, there are gaps, blank pages, and the few reports from the early cycles. They don't match the data.
Sarah stepped closer to Ethan, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the rising noise of the crowd.
Ethan, if you're thinking about trying to manipulate your assignment, I'm not.
He finally turned his head, looking at Sarah with an expression of calm detachment that unsettled her more than Jace's aggression ever could. I can't control where I go. I can only control how I prepare for it. But if I am sent to the blank space, you won't find me crying because my starter pack was inadequate. You'll find me surviving. A myth? Jace crossed his arms, blocking Ethan's view of the screen entirely. Look, Vale. We've known each other since middle school. You're smart. I get it. But this obsession with the old records? It's eating you alive. You need to look at what's real. Right here, right now. Jace gestured to his own biceps, then to the knife at his hip. Strength, speed, combat training. That's how you win, not by reading dusty archives about ghosts.
Strength is irrelevant if the world doesn't allow physical interaction. If World 0 is different, it might not have mana in the way we understand it. It might not have gravity as a constant. You can bench press twice your body weight, Jace, but if the air turns to vacuum or the ground becomes liquid, your muscles are just dead weight.
Then, what's your advantage?
Her brow furrowed. She glanced at Ethan's notebook, then back to his face. If you're not strong, and you're not getting a magic gift, wait, when do we get the gifts? Before or after the drop? The random gift is applied upon entry, Ethan explained, checking his watch again. 5 seconds.
It appears on your body or in your inventory space the moment you cross the threshold. It's random. Pure chance. So while Jace relies on training and you rely on luck, I rely on probability. I've mapped the distribution rates of gifts across 10,000 trials. If I get a low-tier tool, I know exactly how to optimize its use for 36 months. If I get a high-tier artifact, I know which worlds they are useful on. You sound like a robot.
Shaking his head.
All this talk about probabilities and optimizations. Where's the heart? Where's the fight?
The fight is irrelevant if you're dead before you draw your weapon.
The lights in the transfer center shifted from blue to an intense, blinding white. The humming pitch rose to a shriek that vibrated in their teeth. The floor beneath them began to tremble, not with shaking, but with a rhythmic pulsing, like a heartbeat. "Position," a lecturer shouted, his voice amplified by speakers hidden in the ceiling. "All candidates, assume transfer stance. Hands clasped behind heads. Do not resist the pull." Ethan dropped into position immediately, arms locked behind his head, feet shoulder-width apart. He felt Jace stumble slightly next to him, forcing his own balance with sheer physical tension. Sarah closed her eyes tight, her breathing shallow. "3," the lecturer intoned. Ethan thought about the gaps in the data, the silence, the worlds that didn't collapse or survive, but simply vanished from record. He had spent years studying the failures, the ones who died not because they were weak, but because they were unprepared for the impossible. Most candidates prepared for a forest. 2. He thought about World 0, not World 1. The number itself was an anomaly in the assignment algorithm's logic. Why would Earth assign a candidate to a non-existent coordinate? It wasn't a mistake. Mistakes happened randomly. This was consistent. Every 7 years, 3 candidates were assigned to coordinates that should have been empty. They never came back. Their starter packs were never retrieved. 1. The white light consumed everything. The sound vanished. The gravity inverted for a split second, lifting them off their feet, before slamming them downward into the swirling vortex. Ethan kept his eyes open, fighting the urge to scream as his vision fractured into streams of data and light. He saw Sarah's face warp, her expression of fear twisting into shock. He saw Jace shout something, a final burst of defiance against the unknown, but the sound was stretched and distorted, turning into a low mechanical drone. Then, nothing. Ethan hit the ground hard. Dirt rushed up to meet him, filling his mouth with the taste of copper and old soil. The air was cold, biting at his exposed skin. He gasped, rolling onto his side, coughing violently as he cleared his lungs. He was not on a platform. He was in a clearing. The sky above was a bruised purple, devoid of stars, devoid of sun. It was dark, but not empty. It hummed with a low, static energy that made the hairs on his arms prickled with static electricity. The gravity was heavy, pressing down on his chest like a physical weight. Ethan pushed himself up, his hands sinking into soil that felt damp, rich, and unnervingly soft. It wasn't the sterile, compacted dirt of the training grounds. It smelled of ozone and rotting vegetation. He scrambled to his feet, spinning in a circle to assess his surroundings. The forest around him was dense, towering trees with bark that shimmered like oil on water stretching up into the purple gloom. There were no sounds of insects, no wind, just the oppressive silence and the humming energy in the air. A glint of metal near his foot caught his eye. Ethan dropped to one knee, digging his fingers into the mud until his nails scraped against hard plastic. He pulled out a small rectangular case. It was gray, scuffed, and bore the standard issue number, 89402, his starter pack. He cracked the latches open. Inside lay a coil of rope, a multi-tool, 3 days of nutrient paste, a water filter, and a basic flare gun with 2 shells. Standard equipment for World 1 through World 9402. Everything he expected. "Hey." The voice came from behind him, sharp and panicked. Ethan turned. Jace was stumbling out of the tree line, clutching his ribs where he had hit the ground during the transfer. Sarah was lagging a few paces behind him, her face pale and streaked with dirt. They looked like they had been thrown into a blender.
"Are you hurt?"
Standing up and brushing the mud from his knees. He didn't offer help. He held onto his pack as if it were a shield. Jace glared at him, breathing hard. "My shoulder. I think I dislocated it. Help me." Ethan shook his head.
Check your pulse. If it's racing, you're alive.
"If your arm is hanging at an impossible angle, wrap it tight and move on. I don't have time for medical care right now."
We need to secure a perimeter. Don't be ridiculous.
Trying to lift his left arm. A whimper escaped him as he winced in pain.
"We need to stick together. The handbook says new candidates form squads immediately. The handbook is for World 1.
He checked the tree line again. The shadows seemed deeper here, darker than they should be. Look at the sky, Jace. Where is the sun? Jace looked up, squinting against the dim light.
It's night? Maybe it's just overcast. There are no clouds,
He tapped the side of his head with one finger.
and there are no stars. This isn't a forest. The canopy is too dense to see any sky at all, yet it's visible. That means the light is coming from everywhere and nowhere. It's ambient.
Stop analyzing the physics class project and tell us what to do.
Her voice trembling slightly, she hugged her arms around herself, shivering. Ethan, I feel wrong. Like my skin is tingling. Is that normal? It's residual mana radiation, Ethan explained. He kept his eyes on the trees.
It fades in about 10 minutes. Stand behind me. Keep your weapon ready. I don't have a weapon.
Her voice rising in panic. She looked down at her starter pack, which lay open on the ground beside her.
Just rope? Take the flare gun.
He didn't turn to look at her.
Load it. Point it at anything that moves first. Do not hesitate. Why do you sound so calm? Scaring takes energy. I'm conserving it.
A branch snapped in the distance. It wasn't the gentle creak of wood settling. It was sharp, deliberate, and close. The humming in the air spiked in pitch, becoming a high-pitched whine that made Ethan's teeth ache.
Did you hear that?
She gripped the flare gun with both hands, her knuckles white.
Hear what?
Though his head had snapped toward the noise, his good hand went to the knife at his hip, drawing it halfway before he hesitated.
I don't see anything. You won't.
He pulled a small compass from his pocket. The needle was spinning wildly, not pointing north, but rotating in chaotic circles. Look at your compass. Jace. Sarah. Both of you. Jace pulled out his compass. His eyes widened.
It's broken. The needle is stuck. Mine too.
Holding hers up. The glass was cracked, the needle vibrating violently.
Ethan, what is happening? Why are they all failing? The magnetic field is inconsistent.
He snapped his compass shut and tucked it into his pocket.
Or there isn't one. This world doesn't have a north. It has directions relative to threat levels.
Threat levels? Jace scoffed, though he took a step closer to Ethan.
That's nonsense. Monsters don't have GPS coordinates. They do here.
He pointed toward the darkness between two massive trees. The shadows there were moving, shifting independently of the wind. Do you see that? The air is distorting. Heat haze? No, Jace, no, it's not heat. Jace's voice cracked, the skepticism draining out of him as he stepped back, his boots crunching loudly on the forest floor. It looks like smoke, but thick, oily. Ethan didn't look away from the distortion. He watched the way the darkness seemed to pulse, breathing in time with the humming energy that now felt less like static and more like a warning. Don't move, he said. His voice was low, devoid of fear, but edged with urgency. If it's a predator, sudden movement triggers its chase reflex. We know this from the Class 4 incidents on World 7. Class 4, Sarah hissed, her eyes darting between Ethan and the shifting shadow.
I'm ensuring we survive.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out the multi-tool, snapping the largest blade open with a sharp click. The sound was deafening in the silence. Keep your flare gun ready, Sarah. Aim for the center of the distortion. If it's solid matter, the flare will ignite whatever organic material is inside. Jace swallowed audibly. He gripped his knife tighter, his knuckles white. It's not a trap, Ethan interrupted. It's a test. The trial isn't about fighting monsters. It's about surviving the environment. And right now, the environment is hunting us. The shadow lunged. It didn't move like an animal. It flowed, a wave of obsidian liquid surging over the roots of a nearby tree. The humming spiked into a shriek that made Ethan's vision blur. Sarah screamed, fumbling with the flare gun, her fingers slipping on the cold metal casing. Shoot! Jace yelled, backing away until his spine hit a tree trunk. He raised his knife, though it looked pathetic against the swirling darkness. Sarah jerked the trigger. A red streak of fire erupted from the barrel, spinning wildly into the air. It struck nothing but air, exploding in a brilliant burst of crimson light that illuminated the clearing for a split second. The shadow recoiled. It hissed, a sound like steam escaping a valve, and retreated into the deeper gloom of the trees. The humming dropped back to its previous pitch, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. The red light faded, plunging them back into the purple twilight. Ethan didn't lower his multi-tool. He scanned the area where the shadow had been. There were no marks on the ground, no scorch marks from the flare, just damp earth and the lingering smell of ozone. Did you see that? Jace breathed, his eyes wide. It burned. Flares burn anything organic, or anything exposed to mana radiation, Ethan corrected. He took a step forward, his boots sinking into the soft mud. He crouched down, examining the spot where the shadow had been. Look at the soil. There's residue. Silvery dust. Sarah lowered the flare gun slightly, her breathing still ragged. What is it? What was that thing? Ethan stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands. He didn't answer immediately. He looked around the clearing, really looking this time, past the immediate threat, past the trees. His eyes narrowed as he focused on the horizon. In the distance, through a gap in the dense canopy, he saw a glint of light. Not the purple ambient glow of the sky, but a structured artificial light, blue and steady.
There.
Pointing.
Where?
Jace asked, squinting.
I don't see anything. It's not supposed to be visible from here.
He started walking toward the tree line, his pace brisk but controlled.
It's a beacon. Or a signal tower. Are you crazy?
Pushing himself off the tree trunk.
We just fought a shadow monster. You're running toward another light? What if it's more of them?
Monsters don't build towers. This is something else. Something else. Sarah's voice pitched higher, panic creeping in again. What does that mean, Ethan? What isn't a monster? Ethan stopped at the edge of the clearing, looking out toward the distant blue light. He pulled his starter pack closer to his chest, checking the latches one more time. The weight of it felt grounding, a tether to reality in this impossible place.
It means we're not alone.
His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly in the still air.
And it means I'm right.
Right about what? About being arrogant? About ignoring basic survival instincts? He finally turned to look at them, his expression grim. Sarah froze. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Human? But the sky above New Eden was the wrong shade of blue. It wasn't the harsh white-hot azure of Earth's midday sun, nor the soft bruised purple of twilight. It was a dull metallic gray that seemed to press down on the shoulders of anyone standing beneath it. Ethan Vale sat with his back against the crumbling facade of a building that had once been a bank, though the gold letters above the door were long since stripped away by time and weather. He pulled his knees to his chest, shivering not just from the cold, but from the sheer, overwhelming vertigo of realization. Before him lay the corpse of Elias Thorne, a boy who had arrived 3 days prior. He had been strong, athletic, confident. Now he was just meat, picked over by scavengers that moved like shadows in the periphery of Ethan's vision. Ethan hadn't looked at them directly. He knew the rules of the trial better than anyone. Eye contact was an invitation, ignoring them was a strategy. But watching their leader, Kale, argue with the last survivor of their initial group had been necessary preparation. Kale stood 10 feet away, his sword dragging against the asphalt. The blade was chipped, stained with something dark that wasn't quite blood. He paced in front of Lena, who was huddled by an overturned car, her hands covering her ears as if trying to block out the truth. Lena was the strongest fighter of their group, but she had broken when they found the first corpse. Now she was just another statistic waiting to happen.
We can't stay here.
Kicking a piece of debris across the street.
The walls are closing in. I saw them move yesterday.
Lena lowered her hands slightly. Her eyes were red-rimmed, raw from crying for hours. You saw shadows, Kale. You don't know what you're talking about. It's just a dream. We wake up in the dorms tomorrow. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with frustration. He opened his mouth, ready to speak, but Kale raised a hand before he could form a syllable.
Listen to yourself, Lena.
Do dreams smell like rot? Do dreams have gravity pulling you down into the gutter?
Ethan watched them from his shelter of rubble. He knew what they were saying, but he also knew what they weren't saying. But Ethan wasn't stupid. He had studied the history of every trial participant who had returned, the ones who spoke in riddles or died in silence before they could speak at all. The discrepancies had always bothered him.
You're wrong about two things.
His voice cutting through the tension without raising its volume. Kale spun around, sword raised.
Who asked you? Go back to your hole, Vale. I didn't ask for permission.
Keeping his hands visible and open on his knees.
I'm saying you're wrong because I've read the records. Every survivor from Trial 42 to Trial 108 reported different environments. Forests, deserts, oceans. The official explanation is that the trial changes. It's a variable.
Lena stopped crying for a moment, looking at him with a mix of pity and annoyance. And your point is, genius? Ethan stood up slowly, dusting off his jeans. He wasn't a genius. He knew that. He was average in every metric that mattered: strength, speed, intellect. But he had something else. He had obsession. And right now, he had proof.
My point.
Stepping out from behind the car.
Is that variable implies a single system reacting to stimuli.
But if the system is constant and the variables are absolute contradictions, then the stimulus must be external. We aren't being thrown into different rooms in the same house.
We're being sent to different houses.
Kale laughed, a harsh, barking sound.
Different houses? You think we're on another planet? What, magic space portals? Get real, Vale. Not magic.
Gesturing toward the massive walls that circled the city in the distance. They were miles high, constructed of a stone that looked like concrete but shimmered with faint, residual energy. Transportation. Displacement. But look around you, Kale. Look at what's actually here. Ethan walked past him, toward the center of the street where the skeleton of a massive construct lay half buried in the rubble. It was a tank, but not one any military on Earth had built. It was sleek, angular, and covered in glyphs that pulsed with a faint, dying light. But it wasn't the tank that mattered. It was the plating.
Look at the metal, see the rivets, the welds? That's not alien craftsmanship. That's human engineering. High grade, advanced, but human.
Lena stood up, wiping her nose on her sleeve. She looked uneasy now, her fear shifting toward confusion. What are you saying? Ethan pointed to the archway that spanned the main avenue ahead of them. It was broken, cracked down the middle, but the inscription remained intact above the gate. The letters were carved in deep, bold English characters, weathered by centuries of neglect, but still legible. New Eden, Ethan read aloud, his voice steady. Population 2,841,772. The silence that followed was heavier than the gray sky. Kale's sword tip dipped an inch toward the cracked asphalt, the metal scraping loudly against the stone. He didn't lower the weapon entirely. He just stopped treating the air around him as a battlefield and started looking at it like a puzzle he couldn't solve. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, filled only by the distant, mournful wind whistling through the broken ribs of skyscrapers that pierced the gray sky.
2 million.
His voice rough. He didn't look at Ethan. He kept his eyes fixed on the carving. That number isn't a ghost story. That's a census. It's a population count, Ethan corrected, stepping closer to the archway. He needed to touch the letters. His fingers itched with the need to verify the tactile reality of them. Populations don't die off that fast, unless they were wiped out by something specific. Something recent. Lena crawled out from behind the rusted sedan, her knees knocking together as she stood. She didn't speak immediately. She walked past Kale, her boots crunching on shattered glass, and stopped beside Ethan. Up close, the font was even more terrifyingly mundane. It wasn't magical script. It wasn't elven runes or dragon tongue. It was Arial, or something very close to it.
Ethan!
Her voice small.
What does that mean? 2 million people lived here. It means this wasn't a dungeon level.
Tracing the edge of the N in new. His finger came away gray with dust. It means this was a city, a real one, built by humans. Kale finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. The suspicion that had been radiating off him for hours didn't vanish. It just mutated into confusion. Humans don't build things like this. Not without magic, or technology that looks like the glowing tanks we saw in the park yesterday. The tank was built by humans, Ethan insisted, turning to face him. He kept his hands open at his sides, a gesture of calm he didn't feel. I told you. The rivets, the welding seams, that's industrial manufacturing. But look at the walls, Kale. Look at how high they go. Ethan pointed up. The massive barrier surrounding them disappeared into the low-hanging clouds, a monolith of seamless stone that hummed with a frequency so low it was felt in the teeth rather than heard.
We can't climb that. I tried yesterday. I made it 300 feet before my grip failed, and the wall started to pulse. It burned my hands. It's not trying to keep us out.
A cold realization settling in his stomach.
It's keeping something in, or keeping them away.
He glanced toward the street where Elias Thorne's body lay. The scavengers were circling closer now, their shadows lengthening in the dull light. They hadn't attacked yet. They were waiting for the group to weaken, to scatter, to die.
We need to move.
She hugged herself, her arms trembling violently.
Kale said the walls were closing in. The walls aren't moving. That's another discrepancy. The survivors from Trial 55 said their trial area shrank every day until they were forced together. But I looked at the maps in my head. If the trial was a shrinking circle, we'd be dead already. We're not. We're just lost. Lost implies you can be found.
Sheathing his sword with a sharp click that made Lena jump, he turned on Ethan, his face twisted in frustration.
You keep talking about maps and records like you've been here before. You haven't. None of us have. You're guessing. I'm not guessing.
His voice rising just enough to cut through the ambient noise of the dead city. I'm deducing. And right now the deduction is that we are not in a simulation. We are not in a magical realm designed to test our worthiness. We are in a graveyard of a place called New Eden. And if it had 2 million people, someone has to be left to tell us what happened to them. Maybe they hid, Lena suggested, hope flaring in her eyes before she crushed it with a shake of her head. Underground? In the buildings? Ethan looked at the towering ruins around them. They were skeletal remains of civilization, stripped bare of life, but sturdy enough to stand against centuries of wind. Maybe. But if you hide from a threat big enough to kill 2 million people, you don't leave your doors open. He pointed to a doorway 50 yards away. The entrance to what had once been a library or a government building was wide open, the double doors hanging off their hinges like broken wings. Inside, it was pitch black.
We need shelter. Tonight is day 3. If Elias died because he was exposed, we can't afford to be exposed again.
Kale looked from the dark doorway to the gray sky, then back to Ethan. He was the de facto leader by virtue of having the strongest sword and the loudest voice. But for the first time, his authority wavered in the face of Ethan's certainty.
And if it's a trap? Staying out here is a guarantee of death, going in is a chance. A chance you like better than being right?
Kale asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the population count one last time. 2 million lives, erased, and he had no idea if anyone else was still. Ethan didn't blink. He held Kale's gaze, letting the silence stretch until the older boy's jaw tightened with the effort of maintaining his posturing. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet ash and old rot. It wasn't enough to justify the fear in Lena's eyes, but it was enough to justify caution.
Better than being dead and right.
He turned on his heel, walking toward the open doorway. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't ask for a vote. Survival wasn't a democracy. It was a series of calculations, and the math was simple. Inside had fewer variables than outside. Lena moved first. She scrambled after him, her boots skidding on the loose gravel. Wait, what if there's something in there? Ethan interrupted, not stopping. It's stationary. Here. They're circling. He pointed back toward the street where the scavengers had paused, their silhouettes jagged against the gloom. They were waiting. That was worse than attacking. It meant they were hungry and patient. Kale grunted, a sharp, annoyed sound, but he followed. He always followed when Ethan took the lead, not because he trusted the logic, but because he trusted the outcome. For now. They crossed the threshold into the darkness. The air inside was still, heavy with the dust of decades. Ethan fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a small silver lighter, a habit from camping trips that had turned into a ritualistic obsession after the trial rules solidified. He flicked it. The flame sputtered, then caught, casting long, dancing shadows against walls lined with rotting shelves.
It's a library.
Her voice was too loud in the confined space, bouncing off the high ceilings. She hugged her arms tighter.
Books. Real paper books. Fuel or information?
He stood just inside the door, his body blocking the entrance for a moment before he stepped fully inside and drew his sword. The metal sang softly as it left the scabbard, the sound unnaturally crisp in the dead air.
Fire keeps us warm. Books keep us sane. But fire gets you noticed. We don't need to burn them.
He moved deeper into the aisle, the lighter held high. The light revealed rows of leather-bound volumes, mostly decayed, but some still intact.
We need information. If this was a human city, it has archives, records, maybe maps of where people went. People didn't go anywhere.
His eyes scanning the shadows between the shelves.
That's what happens in trials. People die, or they ascend. They don't pack bags and leave. That's the official narrative.
He ran a hand along a shelf. The wood was brittle, crumbling under his touch like dry bone. But the survivors tell different stories, different worlds, different skies. If this city fell, where did the population go? Buried? Transferred? Or just gone? Ethan, look at the floor. Ethan lowered the lighter. The concrete floor of the library was cracked, but not by time, by force. Massive fissures ran through the stone, filled with a dark, viscous substance that had hardened into glass-like shards, and scattered across the floor were not bones, but gear teeth.
Machinery.
His voice dropping to a whisper. He crouched down, probing a cog with the tip of his sword.
This wasn't just a city. It was a factory, or a power plant. New Eden wasn't built by mages.
A chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was built by engineers. Look at the glyphs on the tank outside. They weren't decorative. They were circuitry, integrated circuits, translated into magic runes. So what killed them? Kale stood up, kicking a shard of hardened slag aside.
Did their machines turn on them? The trial did.
The words tasted like copper in his mouth. He looked at the darker corners of the room, feeling the weight of 2 million ghosts pressing against his back. Or someone summoned the trial to end this place. Lena shuddered, wrapping her coat around herself as if it could shield her from the realization. If that's true, why are we here? Why now? Ethan flicked the lighter again, the flame wavering. He walked over to a large desk in the center of the room, its surface covered in a fine layer of gray dust. On it lay a single, leather-bound journal, pristine and untouched by the decay around it. It felt like a beacon, a trap, or a gift. He reached for the book, but hesitated. His hand hovered over the cover, or maybe because the trial is just starting, and this was the tutorial level. Kale stepped forward, his sword still drawn.
Don't touch it. Why? Is it cursed?
Her voice trembling.
Because it's too clean.
Kale said. He pointed to the dust. Around the book, the floor was clear, not swept, just avoided. Something doesn't want us reading that. Ethan stared at the book. The rational part of his brain screamed danger, but the historian part screamed data. He had spent 18 years cataloging the failures of others. Ethan's fingers twitched, hovering millimeters from the leather spine. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against his eardrums like deep water.
Give me 5 seconds.
He didn't look at Kale. His eyes were locked on the book.
If it attacks, you kill it.
Kale lowered his sword an inch, the tip hovering near a pile of dust bunnies that had accumulated in the corner.
You're walking into a snare, Vale. That's how traps work. They look like answers. Traps are designed to catch the greedy.
He finally reached out, his fingers brushing the cover. It was cold. Not temperature cold, but void cold, like touching stone that had never seen the sun. This isn't a trap for us. It's a tombstone. Lena took a step closer, her boots crunching softly on the debris. Open it, please. If there are maps, if there's anything about where the others went. If they're gone, Kale interrupted, his voice tight. Reading their last thoughts won't bring them back. It'll just drown you in their fear. Ethan flipped the book open. The pages were yellowed but flexible, the ink faded to a rusty brown. He began to read, scanning the first paragraph. His breathing slowed. The panic that had been gnawing at his gut since he woke up in the ruins began to recede, replaced by a sharp, icy clarity.
It's a log.
His voice was steady, devoid of the trembling that had plagued him hours ago. Dated 3 days before the collapse. Read it? Lena demanded. She leaned over his shoulder, her breath hot against his neck. What does it say? Ethan turned the page. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. It talks about a frequency, a resonance that started in the lower districts. They called it the silence. It wasn't sound. It was absence. People stopped moving, stopped speaking. Then they stopped existing. Existing? Cale frowned, shifting his weight,
You mean died? No.
keeping his eyes on the page.
It says here that their coordinates dissolved. They didn't die. They were unwritten. Erased from the causal chain.
Lena pulled back, her face pale.
Unwritten? Like deleted? Like data corrupted beyond recovery.
He turned another page. The handwriting grew more erratic, the letters slashing across the paper. There's a mention of a gate, not a physical door, a tear in the fabric of their reality. They tried to close it with mana crystals. It didn't work. Mana crystals? Cale spat the words out like they were poison. So magic is real and dangerous. Magnitude, Ethan corrected. He flipped to the back of the journal, looking for a signature or a date. There was none. Just a final entry scrawled in what looked like charcoal. The walls are holding back the sky, but the sky is hungry. If anyone finds this, we didn't fail the trial. The trial failed us. Run. Do not look back. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Lena stared at the book as if it were a live grenade. Cale slowly sheathed his sword, the click of the blade hitting the scabbard loud in the quiet room. Run, Cale repeated, testing the word.
From what? The silence? From the trial.
He closed the book gently, treating it like a holy relic or a piece of ordnance.
This city wasn't destroyed by war or plague. It was terminated by an external force. An observer.
An observer?
Lena asked, her voice barely a whisper.
Like us? No.
He looked up, meeting Cale's eyes, then Lena's. The realization was settling into his bones, cold and hard. Someone watching us play out the script. Someone who can edit the world. Cale crossed his arms, leaning back against a bookshelf that groaned under the weight of dead history.
You're talking like you've seen this before. I have.
He slid the journal into his coat pocket. It felt heavier than it should. In the stories, the ones nobody believed, the anomalies in the trial records, disappearing acts, mass hallucinations. They weren't accidents. They were corrections. Corrections? Cale pushed off the shelf, walking closer. His shadow fell over Ethan, looming large and threatening.
You're saying we're not the players? You're saying we're the bugs being fixed? I'm saying,
Holding his ground despite the urge to step back.
that New Eden existed before us. It had 2 million people, and they are gone. Not dead. Gone. Because they were corrected.
Lena wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly on her heels. If we're bugs, why do we get to talk? Why do we get to think? He looked toward the window, where the gray light of day 3 was fading into twilight. The shadows were lengthening, stretching out like grasping fingers. The experiment is just beginning, and we're the control group. Cale grabbed Ethan by the shoulder, spinning him around. His grip was tight, fingers digging into Ethan's coat. Control group for what? What are they testing? Ethan didn't pull away. He looked Cale in the eye. The air in the awakening chamber tasted of ozone and stale sweat. Ethan Vale stood shoulder to shoulder with 12 other teenagers, all staring at the glowing hexagonal panels floating before them. The system's voice had just finished explaining the rules. Survive 365 days. It was a cold, mechanical directive that hung in the air like a guillotine blade.
60 days.
Marcus Ren said, his voice cracking slightly. He was tall, broader than Ethan, with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. That's it. No weapons, no magic. Just wait. We don't just wait, said Isabella Reyes, her eyes darting across the interface screens that only she seemed to fully trust. She was adjusting the strap of her backpack, a nervous tic Ethan had noticed since grade school. The system mentioned gifts. We get assigned something, a starting pack. Ethan didn't speak. He watched the text scroll on his own peripheral vision, one random gift. The phrase felt arbitrary, cruel even, in the trial histories he had memorized since he was 7 years old. Random variables were usually death sentences. Preparation was the only shield against chaos. But you couldn't prepare for a dice roll. A chime sounded, sharp and final, assigning gifts. Please place your hand on the interface. One by one, his classmates stepped forward. Marcus placed his palm on the light. A beam of gold erupted from the floor, swirling around him. Gift granted. Iron skin. Rank. E-tank. Marcus grinned, looking back at the group. I can take a hit. Good luck, kids. He stepped back, already flexing his arms, testing the new density in his muscles. Isabella stepped up next. Her light was blue, cooler and quieter. Gift, granted, water compress. Rank, F. She sighed, rubbing her temple. Hydrokinetics? I can make water spheres? That's useful for cleaning, maybe. Then it was Ethan's turn. He approached the pedestal. The stone was warm beneath his fingers. He thought about the history books. The fall of Civilization 1 had been caused by over-reliance on offensive gifts. Civilization 2 survived because their leaders prioritized defense. This wasn't a game. It was an ecosystem. Every gift had a balance. He placed his hand down. The light that emerged was gray, dull, muddy, and utterly unremarkable. It hovered for a second, then sank into his skin without fanfare. Gift granted, salvage, rank. F. Ethan stared at the text. Salvage? The word felt heavy, like lead in his stomach. He had spent hours imagining receiving mana sight or combat analysis, something that helped him understand the trial. Instead, he got garbage collection. Salvage? Marcus laughed, the sound bouncing off the stone walls.
You're a janitor, Ethan? Great. The hero of the hour. It's an F rank.
Looking at her own datapad.
F is bottom tier, but look at the description.
Ethan looked down. The text was still there, pulsing faintly. Salvage available. Extract components from decomposed or broken objects.
It's useless.
The fury rose in his chest, hot and sharp. It wasn't just disappointment, it was a violation of the logic he had built his life around. He wasn't a genius. He knew that. But he had studied the patterns. He knew how systems worked. A garbage ability in a survival scenario was a death sentence. You didn't survive by picking up trash. You survived by finding weapons, by finding food.
Hey.
Clapping a hand on Ethan's shoulder. The touch was heavy, condescending. Don't let it get you down. I'll keep the monsters off while you pick your way through the dungeon. Maybe you can salvage some coins later. Ethan shook his head, slipping out from under Marcus's hand.
I need to see what it does. Suit yourself.
Turning away to talk to another boy who had received fire starter. Ethan walked to the edge of the chamber where a display table held the starter items. Among them lay a broken sword, rusted and snapped in half, clearly a prop from the museum exhibit outside the trial zone. It was just junk, exactly what he expected. He reached out, his heart hammering against his ribs. He touched the cold, jagged metal. Object, Knight Commander's blade. Previous owner, Marcus Ren. Generation, 481. Possible salvage, steel, mana crystal, swordsmanship fragment, memory fragment. Ethan froze. His breath hitched in his throat. He pulled his hand back as if burned. The text remained, hovering in the air before him. It wasn't just collecting junk. It was extracting what something used to be.
Did you get anything good?
Not looking back. Ethan stared at the broken sword.
Yes.
His voice barely a whisper.
I got something.
He looked at Isabella. She had finished her assessment and was watching him with narrowed eyes.
What is it? Your light was gray. Salvage.
The realization was still settling, a terrifying new possibility opening up.
Show me.
Stepping closer to the display table. She pointed at the rusted hilt of the broken sword, her finger hovering inches from the metal.
You're staring at it like it's going to bite you. I didn't say anything yet.
Keeping his eyes fixed on the floating text.
But yes, look closely. It doesn't just see broken sword, it sees the history. History?
Marcus Ren swaggered over, joining them with a heavy thud of his boots. He crossed his arms, the iron-hardened muscles in his forearms gleaming under the chamber's harsh lights. You got trash, Ethan. Trash doesn't have history. Trash has value only when someone else cleans it up. It says, previous owner Marcus Ren. Isabella read aloud, her voice dry. She squinted at the interface in front of Ethan. That's weird. You didn't own that sword, did you? Ethan shook his head slowly.
No, but the system is telling me it was owned by Marcus Ren. A specific Marcus Ren, Generation 481. Generation what?
Frowning. He leaned in, trying to read the text from Ethan's angle.
Is that a rank? I have an E rank. What does 481 mean? It means time.
He finally looked up, meeting Marcus's confused gaze.
The sword is old, very old, and it remembers being sharp.
Remembers?
A short, barking sound.
Metal doesn't remember things, Ethan. It rusts. It breaks. That's all physics knows.
Physics changes in the trial.
She pulled her data pad closer, typing furiously.
The rules stated one random gift.
Gifts are system-generated constructs. If your gift is salvage, and it identifies objects by owner and generation, then the system considers this object significant.
Not just as matter, but as data.
So, Marcus gestured to the sword.
So you can read a book about a sword? Great. How does that help us survive 365 days? Do you plan to interview the steel? I plan to extract it?
He looked at the list of possible salvages again. Steel, mana crystal, swordsmanship fragment, memory fragment. It says I can take these things apart, not just physically, conceptually. Isabella repeated. She tapped her chin, thinking.
Like deconstructing the item's essence? If I use water compress on a rock, I get water. But if you use salvage on this sword, I might get the idea of how to use it.
He felt a strange vibration in his fingertips where he had touched the metal. It wasn't pain. It was anticipation. Or I might get the memory of who held it last. Marcus rolled his eyes.
Okay, wizard, you talk big for a janitor. What's the first thing you're going to salvage? Your sanity? Shut up.
The anger flared again, hot and familiar. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, studying the trial histories, learning from the mistakes of previous generations. And now he had been handed a tool that looked like garbage. It was an insult, a cruel joke. It's hilarious, Marcus grinned. You wanted to be a hero. You wanted to save everyone. Now you get to pick up our trash. Maybe you can salvage some dignity later. Ethan clenched his fists, but he knew Marcus was right about one thing. Strength mattered here, and Ethan had none.
Let me try. Fine by me.
He stepped back, giving Ethan space.
But hurry up. The tutorial ends in 10 minutes. We're supposed to leave for the wild zone.
The wild zone?
Looking at her pad,
That's where the monsters are, right? The ones with actual teeth?
he turned back to the sword. He needed to understand the mechanics. If salvage was about extraction, then he needed to know what he could extract. He placed his hand on the broken blade again. This time, he didn't just touch it. He focused. He thought about taking, not destroying. Taking.
Ready?
She had her datapad raised, recording everything.
What happens when you activate it?
I don't know, Ethan admitted. That's the point. He pressed harder. The gray light from his gift flared around his fingers, dull and muted. The text in his vision expanded. Salvage initiated. Object, Knight Commander's Blade. Extraction complete. Steel fragment X1. Extraction complete. Swordsmanship fragment F rank X1. Warning. Memory fragment requires deeper connection. Marcus asked, leaning in again.
Did you get any shiny bits?
He felt a sudden warmth in his mind. It wasn't knowledge. It was muscle memory, a ghost of motion.
It's gone. Nothing is gone.
It's in your inventory, isn't it?
Ethan checked his status screen. Ethan blinked, his fingers hovering over the translucent blue interface that had materialized before his retinas. The inventory slot glowed faintly, containing 2 distinct entries where there had been nothing but rusted iron moments ago. The weight of the realization hit him harder than any physical blow could have delivered. This wasn't just a tool for recycling waste. It was a cheat code written in the language of history itself.
Is it working?
His voice dripping with skepticism that barely concealed a flicker of unease. He shifted his weight from one boot to the other, the scuff of leather against stone echoing in the quiet chamber. You've been staring at that screen for 10 seconds. Did you break your eyes? He stared at the entry labeled swordsmanship fragment. The description was minimal, but the implication was terrifyingly vast. I extracted a fragment of skill from a broken piece of metal. Marcus snorted, crossing his arms tightly over his chest. A fragment. What? Like a tiny piece of sword. Can you eat that? Does it stab with? He kicked at the display table leg, sending a dull thud through the floor. This is absurd. You got an F-rank gift, and your first move is to pick up dust? I got Firestarter. I can burn things. You can. Read tags. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes hardening. The anger that had been simmering in his gut since the moment his gift appeared coalesced into a cold, sharp focus. If you want to compare utilities, Marcus, go ahead. But tell me this. What good is fire if you don't know where to aim it? Or how much mana it costs? Or when your fuel runs out? That's not fair, Marcus argued, pointing a thick finger at Ethan's chest.
I have power. Raw, immediate power. You have trivia. Power without understanding is dangerous.
She lowered her datapad slightly, her brow furrowed in genuine concern. She glanced between the two boys, her gaze lingering on the glowing text above Ethan's hand. Ethan, look at the second item. The mana crystal. It's faint. Very faint. But it's there. Ethan looked back down. Beneath the skill fragment, a small, pulsing icon represented the crystal. He focused his will on it, trying to sense the difference between it and the steel. It's residual. Leftover energy from when the sword was active. Or when Marcus Ren held it. Marcus Ren, Isabella repeated, her voice rising in pitch. She stepped closer, invading Ethan's personal space until she had to crane her neck to look at the interface. You said this object belonged to a Generation 481 Marcus Ren. The current Marcus Ren is Generation... what? 1? 2? 1, Marcus admitted, his confidence wavering for the first time. He looked at Isabella, then back at Ethan, a furrow of confusion marring his forehead.
I'm Gen 1002, or something close. Why does it matter? Because
the pieces clicking together in his mind with a satisfying, terrifying clarity. If this sword belonged to someone from 481 generations ago, and I can extract their skills, then the system isn't just giving me junk. It's giving me access to the archive. The archive? Marcus laughed again, but it was nervous this time.
You're losing it, Ethan. The trial doesn't have an archive. It has monsters and death. That's the only data we get. It has data.
She tapped her screen, pulling up a schematic of the trial mechanics they had memorized during orientation. One random gift. One objective. Survive 365 days. But the gifts are tied to the history of the world. If salvage allows extraction of previous owner data, then every object we touch is a record of what came before us. So, Marcus demanded, throwing his hands up.
So what? We're walking through a museum? Great. I'll be the tour guide. And here we see the rusted sword that killed 300 goblins. Does that help me fight a wolf pack? No, it helps us survive.
He withdrew his hand from the sword, but the gray light lingered around his fingertips like static electricity. You think strength is just about how hard you can hit, but in the trial, knowledge is leverage. If I can salvage enough fragments, if I can piece together the techniques of those who survived before. You're talking like a scholar, Marcus cut in, sneering.
Scholars die first. They hesitate. They analyze. I just swing. Then you'll die fast.
The words slipped out before he could check them, sharp and precise. He watched Marcus's face contort in offense, but held his ground. I'm not talking about swinging. I'm talking about winning. There's a difference. Isabella let out a short breath, half laugh, half sigh. She looked at Ethan with a new intensity. Ethan, if what you're saying is true, salvage isn't just for objects, is it? Ethan hesitated. The thought had occurred to him the moment he saw the memory fragment warning. It had required a deeper connection. What if that connection wasn't limited to inanimate matter? But the rules were strict. One gift, one objective. He couldn't risk testing the boundaries yet, not without proof.
Not yet.
Ethan pulled his hand back, breaking the connection with the blue interface. The static cling on his fingertips vanished, leaving his skin tingling. He turned to Isabella, who was still staring at the holographic display hovering above her palm. "Dangerous is dying," Isabella countered. She tapped the screen, closing the schematic. "But this changes the meta. If we can strip skills from dead things, why not from alive ones?" "No, that's speculative. Stick to the object for now." He rubbed his hands together, generating a small, pathetic spark that fizzled out in the humid air. "I don't care about your theories, Ethan. I care about the door. The tutorial is ending. Are we just going to stand here debating the philosophical implications of rust?" The walls of the chamber began to hum, a low vibration that rattled Ethan's teeth. The gray light fading from his hands was replaced by a bright, sterile white from the ceiling panels. A chime echoed through the room, sharp and final. "Tutorial complete," a mechanical voice announced. "Welcome to World Zero. Please proceed to the extraction point." Ethan didn't move. He looked at the broken sword one last time. "I'm taking it." "I'm not carrying it," Ethan said. He pointed to his inventory slot. The steel fragment and swordsmanship fragment pulsed gently in the digital grid. "The system gave me the pieces. I get to keep them. The rest of you can have the experience points if you want." "Experience points?" Isabella asked, her eyes widening. She looked at her own status screen, then back at Ethan. "You said swordsmanship fragment. Does that give us XP? Or does it give us a skill?" "It gives me a skill," Ethan corrected. He focused on the fragment in his mind's eye. A wave of vertigo hit him as he forced himself to acknowledge the presence of the data. It wasn't just information, it was a ghost of muscle memory, etched into mana crystals and stored in the sword's residual history. "I can try to use it, or I can sell it. The choice is mine." Marcus stepped forward, his face twisting into a scowl. "You're selling our first gift? You're insane. We need weapons. We need shields. Not whatever that dusty old man knew how to do with a stick." "I am not selling it," Ethan said coldly. He felt the weight of Marcus's gaze, heavy and judgmental. "I'm assessing its value. If I can combine fragments, if I can find a spellbook next to this sword, I might be able to reconstruct something useful, something that wasn't just about swinging metal." "Ethan, listen to yourself. You're describing archiving. You're describing resurrection. I'm describing survival," Ethan replied. He didn't look at her. He looked at the door that was beginning to materialize from the mist ahead. The gray fog was clearing, revealing a massive iron-bound gate. Beyond it, the air smelled of ozone and wet earth. "And if reconstruction is the only way I survive this, then I'll become the ultimate archivist." Marcus shoved past Ethan, his shoulder checking hard against Ethan's arm. The impact sent a shockwave up Ethan's spine, but he didn't flinch. He stood his ground, letting Marcus storm ahead. The other boy kicked at the mist as it swirled around his ankles, shouting curses that were lost in the sudden roar of wind. "Move it, F-rank," Marcus shouted back over his shoulder. "Don't get left behind. The wild zone doesn't care about your fragments." Ethan didn't run. He walked. His boots struck the stone floor with deliberate rhythm. He watched the way Marcus moved, wide stance, weight forward, aggressive but sloppy. The swordsmanship fragment in his inventory reacted to the observation. A faint warmth spread through Ethan's right hand. Not pain. Recognition. The ghost was trying to correct Marcus's posture. For now, he focused on the gate. As they approached, the mist thinned, revealing a landscape that defied every textbook description of Earth. The sky was a bruised purple, streaked with veins of gold. 2 moons hung low on the horizon, one cracked, one whole. Below them lay a sprawling city of black stone and green light, stretching to the horizon. Towers pierced the clouds, connected by bridges of solidified mana. New Eden, Isabella breathed. She pulled out her pad again, her fingers flying across the glass.
Look at the energy readings. They're off the charts. This place, it's alive. It's a city.
Though his voice lacked its usual arrogance, he stared up at the towering spires, his mouth slightly open.
It looks perfect. Too perfect. Nothing is perfect here.
He felt the pull of the land beneath his feet. It was stronger than gravity, older than history. That's why we're here, to break it. Marcus turned to look at him, his eyes narrowing.
What did you say? You heard me.
He pointed toward the city gates, where hundreds of other new arrivals were beginning to trickle out from their own extraction points. They looked confused. The sky over New Eden was not blue. It was a bruised, sickly purple, choked with ash that drifted down like snow from a dying fire. Ethan Vale crouched behind the rusted remains of a stone pillar, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he feared the creatures hunting him could hear it. He wasn't running because he was brave. He was running because his legs were the only things still working correctly. 3 figures emerged from the haze ahead. They wore scraps of leather and bone, their faces masked by woven wire mesh that glinted in the dim light. The air smelled of wet rot and copper. Ethan held his breath, pressing himself into the shadow of the crumbling wall. His hands trembled. He wasn't a genius. He wasn't strong, but he had studied every record of the trials, every historical fragment, every whispered legend of what came before. And he knew that hesitation was death. The leader of the trio stepped forward, kicking aside a pile of debris. He held a jagged blade made from the rib of a beast Ethan couldn't identify. "He's close," the man said. His voice was rough, stripped of mercy. "I can smell him. The scent of fresh blood is thick here." Another figure, taller and leaner, nodded slowly. He dragged a long spear across the cobblestones, the sound screeching like nails on glass. Then we spread out. If he's wounded, he'll try to hide in the ruins. Look for footprints. Look for blood trails. The first man spat on the ground. If you catch him alive, bring him to me. I want to see the look in his eyes when I peel the skin from his bones. Ethan closed his eyes for a split second. Salvage. The word echoed in his mind, not as a solution, but as a warning. If he killed them, could he take their skills? Their memories, he didn't know. He only knew that taking too much might break him. But if they took him, there would be no breaking left to do. There would just be ending. "We've been here for days," the spearman muttered, scanning the horizon with a paranoid twitch in his neck. "Nothing but dust and death."
Why is he still here?
"He's one boy." Ethan shifted his weight, feeling a pebble shift under his boot. The sound was microscopic, insignificant to anyone else, but in the silence of the ruined city, it might as well have been a thunderclap. The leader's head snapped toward him. "Did you hear that?" the leader asked. "Hear what?" the spearman replied, turning slowly. The pebble. Ethan didn't think. He moved. He bolted from his cover, sprinting across the open plaza between them and the entrance to the deeper ruins. He could feel their eyes on his back, hot and hungry. "Get him!" the leader shouted. "Don't let him reach the inner circle." Ethan's lungs burned as he ran. He ducked under a collapsed archway, scraping his shoulder against jagged rock. The pain was sharp and immediate. He gasped, stumbling, but kept moving. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Boots slammed against stone. Shouts echoed off the hollow walls. Ethan glanced back. They were gaining on him. Not by much, but enough. Enough to corner him. "He's tired," the spearman panted, closing the distance. "He'll slow down soon." "Push him," the leader yelled. "Force him into the dead zones." Ethan skidded around a corner, his feet slipping on slick moss. He caught himself on a crumbling wall, his fingers digging into the mortar. The wall gave way slightly, sending a cascade of dust and small rocks tumbling down. It obscured him for a second. A precious second. He looked ahead. The entrance to the central structure loomed before him, a massive archway carved with symbols he didn't recognize. It was dark inside, but it offered cover. It offered a place to think. Ethan took a deep breath and ran toward the darkness. Because the ruins here, they looked familiar. Too familiar. The leader burst into the space behind him, skidding to a halt at the edge of the archway. "Stop," he commanded. "You can't go in there. The air is toxic." You'll choke before you find anything. Ethan didn't stop. He stepped across the threshold. Maybe, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. But I'm not dying out there. The spearman laughed, a harsh barking sound.
You think this place will save you? It's a tomb. Everyone who enters it stays in it. Then I'll be in good company.
Stepping deeper into the gloom. The light from outside faded quickly, replaced by the faint, eerie glow of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. But as his eyes adjusted to the dimness, he saw it. They were lined with metal plating, riveted together in a pattern that made no sense for ancient construction but screamed industrial precision. He reached out, his fingers trembling as they brushed against a cold, smooth surface. "Hey, you're not alone in here." The voice echoed from the darkness ahead, sharp and close. Ethan froze. He hadn't heard footsteps. No one should have been able to move silently through this ruin. He spun around, but the entrance was gone, swallowed by a sudden shift in the architecture, a wall sliding into place, with a hydraulic hiss that vibrated through the floor.
Who's there?
His voice cracking.
Show yourself.
A figure stepped out from behind a row of towering server racks, their silhouette sharp against the faint blue, light pulsing from broken screens. It was a woman, tall and lean, wearing a tattered coat that looked like it had been stitched together from multiple types of armor. Her face was scarred, her eyes hard as flint. "I'm asking the questions," she said, raising a pistol that looked far too advanced for this world.
You are a candidate. I can smell the trial on you. Fresh sweat, fresh fear. I'm just passing through.
Keeping his hands visible but ready to grasp at the air if needed.
I don't want any trouble.
"Trouble found you an hour ago," she replied, taking a step forward. The pistol didn't waver. "Those scavengers outside, they work for me. I'm tired of cleaning up my messes, so you're going to explain why the trial dropped you in New Eden's dead zone and why your heart is beating so loud I can hear it." From here, Ethan's mind raced. He knew the rules, but he didn't know this. This wasn't part of the recorded trials. The records spoke of natural disasters, of magical cataclysms, of gods playing games with mortals.
You're not from here.
His voice steadying.
Where did you get that gun?
The woman tilted her head, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before it was replaced by suspicion.
Does it matter? You're the one in danger. And I'm the only thing standing between you and being picked clean by rats. Let me see the city, just a look. If you let me see what's left, I'll give you something in return. Information, knowledge, things worth more than gold here.
She laughed, a dry, humorless sound.
Knowledge? What do you know about New Eden that I don't? Preserved? By whom? By us.
Gesturing to himself, then to the empty air around them.
Or people like me. Before.
She stared at him, her eyes narrowing. "You're crazy, am I?" Ethan pointed to the ceiling, where cables hung loose like veins. "Look up. Those aren't magic runes. They're data lines. This place was built by trial candidates, thousands of years ago. And New Eden isn't the only one. It's just the biggest." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. The woman lowered the gun completely, holstering it with a slow, deliberate movement. "Show me," she said. Ethan led her deeper into the structure, his heart pounding not from fear now but from awe. They passed through corridors that hummed with residual energy, past rooms filled with machines that looked like they could power a city if they still worked. The scale of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a city, it was a monument to survival.
Where are we going?
Her voice losing some of its edge.
To the core. To find out what happened. To find out why we're here again.
They reached a massive door, sealed with a complex locking mechanism. Ethan placed his hand on the panel, feeling for any residual charge. He couldn't activate it, not yet, but he could feel the pulse of the network beneath his fingertips. It was faint, dying, but alive.
We need to break in? Break it?
Pulling a device from her belt.
Or convince it to open?
"Ethan," she said, testing the name on her tongue.
If you're right, if this was built by candidates, then where are they? Why did they leave?
"I don't know yet," Ethan admitted. "But I intend to find out." The door groaned, metal grinding against metal as the woman's device sparked and whirred. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a chamber filled with holographic displays, flickering and unstable. Images of stars, of maps, of people flooded the air.
Look.
Staring at the main display, it showed a map of the world, dotted with hundreds of red points. There are hundreds of them, ruined cities, all built by candidates, all abandoned. The woman stepped closer, her eyes wide. Hundreds. The red dots pulsed like heartbeats in the darkness. Every major landmass has one. They're not just cities. They're archives. The woman let out a sharp breath, her fingers tracing the edge of the table where the projection hovered.
Archives for what? Survival. Look at the dates. Look at the construction methods. This isn't ancient magic, it's engineering, refined by people who faced the same trial we're facing now.
And they all died? She asked, her tone sharp, accusatory. Some did, Ethan admitted. He pulled up detailed schematics of one of the sites.
Most left, or tried to escape the cycle. But New Eden. This one stayed behind. Why stay in a tomb? Because the trial didn't end for them.
The realization settled in his gut, cold and heavy.
Or rather, they couldn't leave until they solved it. They were stuck in a loop, a test, and we're here because we're the next iteration.
She stared at him, her expression unreadable.
You think we're repeating history? I know we are.
He tapped a specific red dot on the map. It zoomed in, revealing a structure identical to New Eden, but older, more decayed.
This is my point of reference. 300 years ago, based on carbon dating of the organic matter trapped in the cooling systems, they were here, they built this, and they failed. Failed how? They ran out of time.
He turned to face her fully.
The trial has a time limit, 365 days. If you don't survive, you die. But if you solve the puzzle, you leave. They didn't solve it, or they were killed before they could.
Who killed them? She asked, her hand drifting back toward her pistol. If there were hundreds of cities, why is New Eden empty? Ethan shook his head. I don't know yet, but the scavengers outside, they're not natural, they're remnants. Maybe automated defenses gone rogue. Or maybe something else, something worse, she said quietly. She walked to the edge of the platform, looking down into the abyss of the central shaft below. The drop was endless, swallowed by shadow and mist.
We need to move, fast. If there are automated systems still active, they'll wake up soon, and if they do, we won't have time for questions. I agree.
He began to pull maps from the interface, printing them onto thin sheets of synthetic paper that materialized in his hand.
We need to find the core systems, the source of the power. If this place is a loop, there must be a reset button, or a way out. And if there isn't one, then we make one.
He tucked the maps into his coat.
But first, we need to know what we're fighting. I can sense something. In the walls. A presence. Not human, not animal. It's watching us.
She froze, her head tilted, ears straining.
I don't hear anything. That's because it's not using sound.
He closed his eyes, focusing on the faint hum of energy that had been prickling at the back of his neck since he entered the city. It wasn't just power lines. It was data, massive amounts of data, flowing through the walls like blood through veins. It's digital, or whatever comes after digital in this world.
A ghost in the machine?
A hint of skepticism in her voice.
Close.
He opened his eyes.
A consciousness. Fragments of the people who built this place. They're still here, trapped in the code.
She looked at him with a mix of pity and fear. You're talking to ghosts, candidate.
And they're trying to warn us. Warn us about what? The harvest.
The word tasted like ash in his mouth. It was a term from the oldest, most obscure texts of trial history. Texts that were dismissed as myth. The trial isn't just about survival. It's about feeding something. Something big. And New Eden is its larder. She paled.
If you're right, then we're not just candidates. We're food.
Ethan didn't answer. Because as he looked at the map, he saw it again. The pattern of the red dots. They weren't random. They were arranged in a spiral, leading inward. To him,
it's focusing on New Eden, because we're the biggest cluster of biomass, the strongest candidates.
So what do we do? She asked, her hand steady now, resigned to the inevitable.
We survive.
He looked at the door they had just come through. It was sealed tight.
And we find the exit before the harvest comes. And if we can't find it, Then we salvage everything we can.
He felt the familiar itch in his hands, the pull of the gift he had barely understood until now. Salvage. Take from the dead. Build something new. We take what's left of their knowledge, their strength, and we use it to break the loop. She nodded slowly. Okay, lead the way, candidate. Ethan turned away from the holographic map, the red dots still pulsing behind his eyes like angry sores. Now,
Stay close.
gripping the handle of his scavenged pry bar. His knuckles were white. If those ghosts are real, they might not like intruders. The woman, whose name he still hadn't learned despite her earlier introduction, didn't argue. She checked the charge on her sidearm, the click of the safety echoing in the vast, silent chamber. I don't trust this place, she said.
It feels wrong. Like standing on a grave. We are standing on a grave.
He stepped toward the exit, his boots clicking against the metallic grating of the floor. But graves hold secrets, and secrets are power. I need that power. They moved out into the corridor, leaving the humming core behind them. The air here was colder, stale with the scent of ozone and old dust. Ethan's senses were screaming now. The hum he had felt in the chamber was stronger here, a low-frequency vibration that rattled his teeth. It wasn't just data anymore, it was intent. Did you feel that? The woman asked, her hand tightening on her weapon. What? A shift, she said. The pressure dropped. Just for a second. Ethan stopped. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses, trying to parse the chaotic stream of information flooding his mind through his gift. It was overwhelming. Too much data. Too many fragmented voices. He felt a sharp headache spike behind his eyes. My limits, he thought. I can't hold it all.
It's waking up.
Opening his eyes and looking at her.
The city is reactive. It knows we're here.
Because the lights are changing, Ethan pointed upward. The sterile white overhead strips flickered, shifting to a deep, ominous amber. Amber means warning, or threat. Ambush, she said, raising her gun. Where? Ethan scanned the shadows at the end of the corridor. The amber light cast long, distorted shapes against the walls. They looked like people, twisted, elongated figures.
Not ambushers.
His voice tight.
Defenses. Let them come.
Her stance shifting to a combat-ready position. I'm tired of running. Ethan wanted to tell her to run, but he couldn't. He was obsessed with understanding the mechanics of this world. If he ran now, he'd miss the data. He'd miss the clue that could save them. Instead, he stepped forward, placing himself between the woman and the advancing shadows. Wait, he said. Let me try to salvage.
Salvage?
She frowned.
You're going to fight them with a pry bar? No.
He focused on the nearest shadow as it detached itself from the wall. It wasn't a person. It was a construct of scrap metal and static, holding together by sheer willpower and residual mana. I'm going to take what's left. The construct lunged, fast, faster than anything organic should move. Ethan didn't dodge. He slammed his hand against the chest of the creature as it struck him. The impact bruised his ribs, cracking a rib or two. Pain flared, bright and hot. But underneath the pain, he felt the structure of the thing. Fragile, broken, incomplete, salvage. The world slowed. Ethan saw the threads of energy holding the construct together. He reached for them. Not to break them, but to take them. He pulled. A shockwave of information hit him. Guardian Class 4 Maintenance Protocol. Failure status, critical. The words flooded his mind. His head pounded. Vision swam. He wanted to scream. It was too much noise. He let go. The construct collapsed, turning into a pile of inert junk. Ethan gasped, falling to one knee, clutching his head. Get up, he wheezed. The woman grabbed him by the shoulder, hauling him to his feet. She demanded. I'm fine, Ethan lied. He wiped blood from his nose. It worked. I got data, basic defense protocols. She looked at the pile of junk with disgust.
You turned it into information? It's useful.
Though he wasn't sure yet if it was. The headache was fading, replaced by a cold clarity. He looked down the corridor. More shadows were detaching from the walls. More constructs, dozens of them.
I know.
He looked at her, his eyes hard.
We need to move, now, before they coordinate. To the surface, the core was a trap. The truth is up top, in the ruins.
She hesitated. And if we're hunted? Ethan started running, dragging her with him. Then we salvaged them too. The sky over World Zero was not blue. It was a bruised purple, thick with clouds that moved too fast, like oil on water. I stood at the edge of the clearing where the others had landed, my boots sinking into mud that smelled of ozone and rot. Around me, 9,000 18-year-olds were waking up. Some screamed, some vomited. Most just stared at their hands, waiting for the pain to start or stop, but never starting. I didn't wait. I sat on a chunk of concrete, pulled my knees to my chest, and listened. The noise was deafening, thousands of voices arguing, panicking, commanding. But beneath it, there was a rhythm, a hierarchy forming in real time. A girl with hair like spun gold stood atop a rubble pile. Her hands glowed with a faint, pulsing light. "Calm down," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We need order. If we stay here, the environment will kill us within hours." "Who asked you?" A boy roared back. He was huge, his skin turning to stone as he flexed. "I lead because I can crush them." Obsession wasn't just reading books, it was watching patterns. The strongest gifts became leaders immediately. It was primal. It was inevitable. But it was also fragile. I closed my eyes and focused inward. Salvage. The word felt heavy in my mind, a key turning in a lock. I reached out with my consciousness, touching the dead world around me. The concrete under my feet wasn't just rock, it was memory, it was structure waiting to be unmade. I pulled. The air grew cold. Dust swirled around my fingers, coalescing into a small, jagged shard of metal in my palm. It hummed with potential. Not magic. Not yet. Just raw, unfiltered history, stripped down to its base components. "Hey, you there." The voice snapped me out of the trance. I opened my eyes. A group of 3 boys were standing over me. The one who spoke wore a leather jacket and held a baseball bat that seemed to crackle with static electricity. "Give us what you've got. You're hoarding." I looked at the shard in my hand, then at the maniacal grin on his face. I wasn't a genius. I wasn't strong. But I knew something they didn't. In trial history, early conflict was usually between survivors who hadn't yet realized the world was already hunting them. They were fighting each other for scraps while the horizon burned. "No," I said. The boy with the bat laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. "What did you say? You're alone, kid. 9,000 people out there, and you think you can just sit here? Give it up. Salvage isn't a gift for fighting," I said, standing up slowly. My legs shook, but my voice was steady. "It's for taking apart. For understanding. You want to take it? Try." He swung the bat. It wasn't fast, but it was heavy. I didn't dodge. I let it hit my shoulder. The pain was white-hot, a spike driving into my bone. But in that moment of impact, I didn't panic. I focused on the connection between the bat and the air around it. Salvage. The bat dissolved. Not broken, unmade. It turned into a cloud of gray dust that scattered on the wind. The boy stared at his empty hand, then at me. His eyes widened in terror. "What are you?" "I'm Ethan Vale," I said, rubbing my bruised shoulder. "And you're leaving." The other 2 took a step back. The fear was palpable, thick in the air. They didn't attack again. They ran, disappearing into the crowd of confused teens. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard. My shoulder throbbed. That had been stupid, reckless. But it established something. Fear. In World Zero, fear was more valuable than strength. I turned my back on them and looked toward the north. The sky there was darker, swirling with black tendrils that seemed to reach down like fingers. New Eden. Everyone whispered about it in the hushed tones of conspiracy theorists and doomsday preppers I used to listen to on forums before we all ended up here. They said it was a sanctuary, a second chance. But looking at those black tendrils, I saw only corruption. I needed supplies. I needed shelter. and I needed to know why the ruins in the distance looked like they were bleeding. A week passed. The group solidified. The strong ruled. The weak followed or died. I stayed on the edges, scavenging what others discarded. I learned that salvage worked best on dead things. Living things resisted. But debris yielded. On the 8th day, I found her in a collapsed hospital wing. She was curled up under a slab of ceiling, half buried in rubble, her face pale and sweat-slicked. A gash ran from her temple to her jaw, oozing blood. Her eyes were closed, but her hands were clenched around nothing, as if she were holding on to the last strands of her life. I knelt beside her. Hey. Her eyes fluttered open. They were green, sharp with panic. She tried to push herself up, but collapsed back down with a gasp. Go away. I'm infected. You're bleeding, I said. And you're dead if you stay there. I didn't move. I just held her gaze, my eyes scanning the wound. It wasn't bleeding anymore. The edges were sealing themselves, skin knitting together with an unnatural speed that made my stomach turn. You're not infected, I said. You're healing. She blinked, confusion cutting through the pain. What? Look at your hand, I said, pointing to the palm where a deep cut had been seconds ago. It was gone. Smooth, unbroken skin. Your gift is active. You just don't know how to control it yet. She pulled her hand back as if I'd struck her. Stay away from me. Do you have any idea what happens if I lose control? If I drain everything around me to keep myself alive? I've seen worse, I said. I tapped the side of my head, a gesture that felt heavy with implication, but was physically harmless. I can take apart what's broken. You can put it back together. We have complementary skills, or you're going to die here, and I'm not interested in burying someone who could be useful. She stared at me, her chest heaving. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. Then she laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Useful? You think I'm some kind of medic? I'm a monster, kid. I feel it. When I heal something, I lose part of myself. My own warmth, my energy, my life. Then you need to conserve it, I said. Which means finding things worth healing before your body shuts down on its own. She pushed herself up, wincing as her muscles strained against the rubble. She looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. And who are you? Another strong man who thinks he can lead us to New Eden. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Isabella Reyes. If you betray me, Ethan, I will find a way to drain you dry even from a mile away. We'll see, I said. I extended a hand. She looked at it, then at my face, before gripping it firmly. Her skin was cold, unnaturally so, but there was strength in her grip, a tension like a coiled spring. Let's move. The sun is going down, and I don't trust the shadows. We walked together through the ruins of what used to be a city block. It was eerie how quiet it had become since the initial landing. The screaming had stopped, replaced by the low hum of anxiety and the occasional crash of distant violence. Isabella walked stiffly beside me, her eyes darting left and right, scanning for threats she couldn't yet see. Do you know where New Eden is? She asked, breaking the silence. I have a direction, I said. Northwest, through the corrupted zones. Corrupted? She shivered. You mean the dead zones, where the air is thick with malice. It's not just air, I corrected. It's history. The world is trying to rewrite itself, and it hates us for being here. She stopped, looking at me with wide eyes. You talk like you've been here before, like you're expecting this. She frowned. And what do survivors do? I pointed ahead to a skeletal structure of a skyscraper, its glass windows shattered, its steel beams twisted into grotesque shapes, like this one. It's a tomb. But underneath it? Supplies. Tools. Maybe even a way to communicate with the system. She looked at the building with horror. It feels wrong, like a stomach digesting us. It is, I said, but we have no choice. If we stay in the open, the environment will get us, or the stronger gifts will. As if, on cue, a roar echoed from behind us. We turned to see a group of 6 teens running toward us, led by a boy whose skin had hardened into jagged plates of iron. He carried a club made from a car axle, swinging it with wild abandon. "Give us the girl," he shouted. "She's ours. The strongest take what they want." Isabella stepped in front of me, her hands glowing with a soft green light. "Stay back," she warned. Her voice was steady, but I could see the tremor in her fingers. She was holding back, afraid of what she might unleash if she gave in. The leader laughed. "Or what? You'll heal us to death. Go ahead. Try it." I stepped forward, pulling a small shard of metal from my pocket. It was warm, humming with the residual energy of its previous form. "She's right," I said calmly. "You don't want to test her. But you're going to test me," the leader sneered. "Who are you? Some scavenger rat?" "I'm Ethan Vale," I said, "and I'm taking your club." I focused on the metal shaft of his weapon. Salvage. The air around the axe shimmered. The iron didn't break. It unraveled, turning into a fine gray mist that drifted. The iron dissolved into gray dust, drifting down to settle on the leader's feet. He stared at his empty hands, then at me, his face draining of color. The club was gone, not broken, unmade. Just a cloud of metallic silt falling through the air between us. "You," he whispered. The word cracked in his throat. My voice was flat, dead. "Give me the rest. Now." The other 5 teens looked at each other, their bravado evaporating like water on hot stone. They were strong, yes, but strength without understanding is just a target, and they knew I had just erased the source of their power with a thought. No one moved to attack. No one even breathed loudly. "Run." The leader finally managed. He scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet before scrambling up again. His followers turned and bolted, disappearing into the narrow alleys of the ruined street. Isabella let out a breath she'd been holding for 10 seconds. The green glow in her hands faded, leaving her looking paler than before. She leaned against a crumbling wall, clutching her side. That was careless. "I needed to establish dominance," I said. I picked up the small pile of gray dust that had been the leader's weapon. It felt warm in my palm, vibrating slightly. Salvage didn't just destroy, it preserved potential. But for now, it was just debris. They'll come back with numbers next time, or weapons that don't have a single point of failure. Next time. Isabella pushed herself off the wall, wincing. "You want them to come back? Do you realize what happened just then?" "I know what happened," I said. I looked at her. Her eyes were wide, fixed on my hands. "Your gift is leaking. You're shaking." She looked down at her own hands. They were trembling, fine tremors that ran up her arms. "Healing isn't free, Ethan. It takes from me. If I don't rest, if I don't eat, I'll just fade away, and you'll be alone again. Then we find food," I said, "and shelter. Now." We moved toward the skeletal skyscraper. The air grew colder as we entered its shadow. Inside, the darkness was absolute, broken only by the occasional glint of shattered glass reflecting the dying light from outside. Isabella lit a small flame in her palm, not with fire, but with a concentrated burst of biological energy that warmed the air around her hand. It cast long, dancing shadows against the walls. "It's a building," I said, "built by people who needed height and safety, just like us. Don't let your fear write the story for you." We climbed. The stairs were gone, collapsed into jagged heaps of concrete and rebar, forcing us to use salvage on the debris to create paths, or simply climb over. The ruins. Every step was a calculation, every jump was a risk. But I kept moving. Forward was the only direction that didn't involve death. By the time we reached the 20th floor, the sun had set completely. The sky above was a bruised purple, streaked with those black tendrils that seemed to pulse with a slow, rhythmic malice. New Eden still loomed in the distance, a beacon of white light that felt more like a threat than a promise. We found a room near the center of the floor that looked relatively intact. A door hung off its hinges on one side. Inside there were desks, chairs, and shelves. Most of it had been ransacked long ago, but there were scraps left behind. Paper, plastic, rubber.
I'm going to check the roof.
I said. "See what we're dealing with. Stay here."
No,
She stood up, her face hardening.
you don't go alone. Not in a place like this. If something jumps out of the dark, you can salvage it, but you can't save yourself from three at once. And if I get hurt,
You won't? I said. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak, but her will was iron. You think you're the only one who sees the pattern? You think you're the only one who knows what's coming? We're a team, Ethan, for now, and teams stick together. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was terrified. I could see it in the way her eyes darted to the corners of the room, in the tightness of her jaw. But she was standing. She was offering herself as a shield. It was stupid, dangerous, and necessary. Fine, I said. We move together, light ahead, follow my steps. We climbed to the roof. The wind-up here was fierce, whipping our clothes and hair around our faces. It smelled of ozone and old blood. From this height, we could see the full scope of the chaos below. Fires burned in clusters across the city. Figures moved like ants in the streets. And further out, beyond the ruins, lay the green expanse of New Eden. I narrowed my eyes, trying to look past the glare. But look around you. We have to move, I said, my eyes locked on the distant glow. We don't have time to watch them build their empire. Isabella stepped up beside me, squinting against the wind. Look closer. See the lights? They're not just gathering, they're constructing something. I see it, I muttered. My mind raced, calculating distances, supply lines, and the inevitable conflict.
they're building walls, and they're taking everything that isn't nailed down. Then we take what's left.
She turned away from the horizon, her gaze sweeping over the ruined cityscape around us. The weak are being culled, Ethan. The strong are consolidating power. We can't fight them yet. Not like this. No, I agreed. We survived them. A sudden chill ran down my spine. It wasn't the wind. It was a sensation of eyes upon us, invisible, heavy, and ancient.
Do you feel that?
Isabella whispered. She wrapped her arms around herself, her breath pluming in the cold air. Something is wrong here. This roof. It's not empty. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My senses were screaming, a primal warning that had nothing to do with logic or history books. The shadows between the skyscrapers seemed to deepen, stretching toward us like grasping fingers. Down, I said sharply. Now. We scrambled back inside the room just as a low hum vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't sound, it was pressure. A wave of force that rattled the teeth in my skull. Isabella stumbled, catching herself on a desk. What was that? A wake-up call, I said, my voice tight. I moved to the window, peering through a gap in the blinds. The lights in New Eden had flared brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the hum outside.
They know we're here. They.
Her eyes wide.
Who is they? The group in New Eden? Worse.
I said. I pointed to the sky. Above us, the clouds were parting, revealing a vast geometric pattern etched into the very fabric of the atmosphere. It looked like a cage, the world itself. Isabella followed my gaze, her face draining of color. A barrier? Like a dome? Maybe, I said. Or maybe just an announcement. I turned to look at her. Her hands were shaking violently now. The green glow in her palms had flickered out completely, leaving her skin pale and translucent. You're fading, I said. It wasn't a question. I'm fine, she lied. She tried to stand tall, but her legs buckled slightly. Just tired. The environment is draining me. It's trying to break us down before we even start. We can't stay here, I said. The hum will draw attention, and if it is a cage, we need to know where the weak points are. Where are you going? She asked, panic rising in her voice. To find shelter that doesn't scream at us, I said. I grabbed my pack, checking the few items I had salvaged from the initial drop. A knife, a length of rope, and a handful of gray dust, the remains of the iron club. We're moving. Ethan, wait, she called out as I headed for the door. You can't do this alone. You don't know what's out there. I know enough, I said. I paused in the doorway, looking back at her. And you know enough to keep breathing. Don't waste your vitality on worry. Save it for when we actually need to heal. I slipped out into the corridor. The air was stale, thick with the smell of decay and old electricity. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, as if gravity itself was trying to pin me to the floor. I moved carefully, testing each step before committing my weight. The building groaned around me, a dying beast shifting in its death throes. I avoided the main stairwells. They were too exposed, too likely to be patrolled by those who had already claimed territory. Instead, I looked for service elevators, ventilation shafts, anything that would keep me out of sight. After 10 minutes of careful descent, I found a maintenance hatch leading to the lower levels. The air here was different, colder, damp, and smelling of mold. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing piles of rubble and twisted metal. I paused, listening. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. Then, a scuff. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I crouched low, pressing myself into the shadow of a collapsed pillar. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from around the corner. Not running. Hunting. A figure emerged from the darkness ahead. It was tall, draped in tattered cloaks made of what looked like human skin stitched together with wire. Its face was hidden behind a mask of polished bone. In its hand, it held a spear tipped with glowing blue crystal. The hunter stopped. It tilted its head, sniffing the air. I held my breath. My mind raced. Salvage. I could try to dismantle the spear, but if I missed, if the dust didn't cover enough of it, the hunter would be on me in a second, and I had no other weapon. The hunter took a step forward. Its eyes, visible through the eye holes of the mask, glowed with a faint, unnatural light. It saw something it shouldn't have seen, or smelled something I couldn't hide. The wind carried the smell of ash and old blood, a scent that had become as familiar to Ethan Vale as his own breath. He stood at the edge of what used to be a library, though now it was merely a skeleton of burnt timber and shattered stone. Around him, the rest of the group was preparing for the hunt. They were sharpening blades, checking the edges of their crude spears, and discussing the route to the nearest monster lair with the confidence of people who believed strength was the only currency that mattered.
Are you coming, Vale?
Wiping mud from his forehead with a gloved hand. His voice cut through the low hum of anticipation that had settled over the group since they arrived in this new, broken world. The sun beasts are migrating south. If we wait another hour, the sun will set, and we won't have the light to track them. Ethan didn't look up from the pile of rubble he was inspecting. His fingers traced the jagged edge of a stone slab, feeling for the subtle vibration that signaled something beneath the surface. "I'm not hunting today," he said. Cale frowned, tilting his head as if Ethan had grown a second head.
We need the meat. We need the hides. And we need to thin their numbers before they get closer to the camp. You have a gift, Vale. It would be selfish to sit out. I'm not sitting out.
Standing up and brushing dust from his knees.
I'm doing something else.
Sarah chimed in, her eyes rolling upward in exaggerated exasperation. She adjusted the strap of her bow, which looked dangerously thin compared to her own frame. Ethan felt a familiar pang of anger in his chest, but he forced it down. He wasn't angry because they were wrong. He was angry because they were dangerously, catastrophically ignorant. He had spent 18 years studying trial history before the sky cracked open and dropped them all into this nightmare. He knew how the first settlements fell.
Strength doesn't matter if you're dead of dysentery next week.
His shadow loomed over Ethan.
We have water. We have fire. We have weapons. What more do you need? Just come with us. If you want to play archaeologist later, fine. But right now, we survive by being ready for a fight. I am ready.
He turned back to the rubble. There was something here. It wasn't just debris. It was structure. Layered, compressed layers of pre-trial civilization buried under decades of neglect and recent battle damage. To Ethan, it was a map.
Garbage is garbage.
Turning her back on him.
Let's go, Cale. Before he starts digging for gold coins in the dirt.
Cale hesitated, looking from Ethan to the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip below the jagged skyline of the ruins. Fine, but don't expect us to wait around when you inevitably find nothing again. We'll be back at dusk. If you're still here, we'll leave food for you. If you're not. He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Ethan didn't respond. He watched them go, their figures shrinking as they moved toward the ridge. Once they were gone, The silence rushed back in, heavy and oppressive. Ethan knelt down again. He placed both hands on a large flat stone that had been cracked down the middle. It felt warm, not from the sun which was fading, but from something deeper, something alive. He closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, grasping at the faint ghostly echo of the object's origin. He focused on the intent behind its creation. Not magic. Not exactly, but design. Purpose. Salvage. The word appeared in his mind like a command. The world around him seemed to sharpen. The dust particles hanging in the air slowed, then stopped. For a moment, Ethan wasn't looking at a broken slab of concrete. He was seeing the blueprint. He saw the rebar inside, the mixture of sand and cement, the way it had been poured to withstand pressure. He pulled. It wasn't physical strength that moved the stone. It was the unraveling of its history. The mortar dissolved into powder. The rebar snapped back into a pristine, unused state. The cracks healed themselves. In 3 seconds, the slab floated in front of Ethan, pristine and gleaming, before he let go. It clattered to the ground, solid and real once more. Ethan panted, sweat breaking out on his forehead. The effort was draining, like running a marathon in an hour. But beneath the exhaustion, there was a spark of something else. Hope. Dangerous, reckless hope. He moved to the next pile. This one was different. It was a tangle of wires and ceramic tubes, half buried in mud. He reached out again. Salvage. The wires uncoiled themselves. The ceramic purified itself from the grime. A faint blue light pulsed within the assembly before fading into invisibility. Ethan picked it up. It was heavy, compact. The heavy object in his hands was not just salvage, it was potential. Ethan stood up, his knees popping from the strain of crouching for too long in the ruins. He held the device tight against his chest, feeling the hum of latent power vibrating through his palms. It wasn't magic, not in the way the others practiced their gifts. It was engineering, stripped bare and restored to its original intent. He needed to test it, but he couldn't do it here. Not with Kale's eyes on him later tonight. He had to move. He slipped the purification unit into his pack, the weight unfamiliar but reassuring. He walked away from the library ruins, heading not toward the campsite where the others would regroup, but deeper into the wrecked city. By the time he reached the outskirts of the industrial district, dusk had fully settled. The air was colder here, smelling of rust and stagnant water. Ethan found a partially collapsed factory, its walls breached by what looked like a monster's claw mark. Inside, it was dark, sheltered, and hidden from view. He laid out his findings on a cleanish patch of concrete floor. He didn't have much time before the others returned with their kills, and potentially, their questions. Or worse, their judgment. If they saw him as useful, they might force him to keep doing it. If they saw him as weak, they might leave him behind. He needed leverage. Immediate, undeniable proof that his method was superior to their violence. He started with the construction materials he had pulled from a nearby collapsed housing block. Reinforced steel beams, twisted and broken, lay in a heap. He touched them. Salvage. The metal screamed silently as it realigned. Beams straightened. Rust flaked away, leaving gleaming silver surfaces. Ethan's head throbbed with the effort, but he pushed through. He wasn't just repairing. He was restoring. He built a small frame in the center of the room, a skeleton of reinforced construction. It looked solid, invincible. Next, he went for the plants. He had scavenged seeds from a destroyed greenhouse weeks ago, keeping them dry and hidden. Now, he found some nutrient-rich soil left behind by a burst pipe. He planted the seeds in the base of his steel frame. Salvage. The soil transformed, rich with mana-infused nutrients, accelerating growth. Green shoots pushed through the dirt within seconds. Leaves unfurled. Vines climbed the steel frame, blooming with small white flowers that glowed faintly. Mana agriculture. He had food that grew without sun or season. He needed defense, not just for himself, but to show Kale that strength wasn't just about swinging a sword. He found an old police station nearby. The doors were battered wood. He touched them. Salvage. The wood hardened into something akin to iron. The hinges disappeared. The locks engaged with a click that echoed in the silence. Basic enchantment. Not a complex spell, but a fundamental alteration of reality. A door that could not be opened without a key that no longer existed. He dragged his frame and the potted plants back to the edge of the industrial zone, where he knew the group would have to pass if they wanted to avoid the monster-heavy downtown. He set up a small campfire, using dry wood from the reinforced structure he'd built, because who needs firewood when you can salvage dry timber from anything? Kale and Sarah returned just as the sun dipped below the horizon. They were covered in blood. Kale dragged a massive horned beast behind him. Sarah had arrows embedded in her shoulders like trophies. They stopped dead when they saw Ethan's camp. It wasn't a huddled mass of shivering survivors. It was a neat, glowing station of efficiency. Ethan didn't look up as they approached. He was carefully polishing a piece of salvaged glass.
You're still here.
His voice tight. He dropped the beast carcass with a wet thud.
Did you find anything valuable? Or just more dust?
Sarah laughed, a harsh, barking sound. She leaned on her bow.
Look at this place, Ethan. A factory? You're living in a tin can while we live like kings. We have meat. We have glory. What do you have? A pile of pretty stones.
Ethan set the glass down. He walked over to his steel frame and plucked a leaf from the vine. It pulsed with soft light. I have shelter that won't collapse when the wind picks up, he said quietly. Shelter? Kale snorted. He kicked at the base of the steel beam. It didn't budge. He frowned, trying to kick it again with more force. His foot bounced off as if it had hit concrete.
This is reinforced steel. Where did you get this? That kind of material is rare. Pre-trial military grade. I found it. In the rubble. In a week?
Sarah's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, inspecting the vines. She touched one, then pulled her hand back as if burned by cold. This plant, it's not normal. It glows. How did you grow this in hours? Not days. Hours. Ethan ignored the questions that followed, and instead walked to his small table. He picked up a canteen he had filled earlier, using the water purifier. The water inside was crystal clear, glowing with a faint blue hue. He handed it to Kale.
Drink.
Kale took it skeptically.
What's in it? Pure water, no parasites.
No bacteria. From a pipe that hasn't had clean water in 20 years. Kale stared at the canteen, then up at Ethan. He didn't drink immediately. Instead, he tossed the heavy carcass of the horned beast aside and stepped closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. You're playing a dangerous game, Vale, he said. His voice was low, stripped of its usual bravado. There was fear in it. Real, cold fear. People don't just find pre-trial military-grade steel in a week. Not unless they stole it from a vault. I found it in the rubble, Ethan repeated, keeping his face neutral. He picked up a small, sharp shard of salvaged glass and began cleaning it with a rag. I told you. I search. You hunt. Different strategies. Sarah crossed her arms, her eyes darting between the glowing vines, the pristine steel frame, and the canteen in Kale's hand. She looked sick, not from the smell of blood but from confusion. Her gift was strength. It gave answers to physical problems. This didn't fit. If that thing collapses, she said, pointing her bow at the steel structure behind Ethan, we all die under it. We can't risk it. Tear it down. Now. Ethan stopped cleaning the glass. He looked up, meeting her gaze without flinching.
Why? Are you afraid it's too good for you? It's not about goodness.
She took a step forward, her knuckles white on the bowstring.
It's about balance. You come out of nowhere dragging around miracles while we kill ourselves every day just to stay alive. It makes people nervous. It makes them wonder where your advantage comes from. It comes from reading.
He set the glass down on the small table made of salvaged wood.
While you were learning how to punch harder, I was learning what built this world. And now that I know, I'm using it.
Kale finally brought the canteen to his lips. He took a long, slow sip. He paused, his eyes widening slightly. He lowered the container, turning it over in his hands as if checking for poison. It's cold, he murmured. And clean. Too clean. He looked at Ethan, his expression hardening into something calculating.
How much can you do? How many of these tricks do you have? enough to keep us alive for a long time. Longer than any of you will survive in those caves. Caves are safe.
The word came out too fast. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. Caves keep the monsters out. This, he gestured vaguely at the glowing vines and the shimmering water.
This is a beacon. You're shouting, I have resources to every predator in the city. Let them come.
He stood up, brushing dust off his pants. The motion was casual, but he positioned himself between Kale and the food source. With reinforced construction and basic enchantments, they won't get past the door. And if they do, my traps are already set in the perimeter. Sarah laughed, but it was a brittle sound. Traps? You think you're a soldier? You're just a scavenger with a parlor trick. I'm surviving, Ethan corrected. While you're playing hero, look at yourself, Sarah. Your arrows are dull, your bowstring is frayed, you have no water. I do. You need sleep in shifts because you never know when the next attack comes. I can build a shelter that stays dry and warm while you shiver. Kale took another sip, then handed the canteen back to Ethan. His hand trembled slightly. Give me some more, he said. For the group? The group? Sarah scoffed. They don't need your charity, Vale. They need strength, real strength. They need to live. Kale cut in. He didn't look at Sarah. He kept his eyes on Ethan.
How much water can you purify? Per day? I don't know. I haven't tested the limits yet. The process drains me, but I can try.
Kale nodded slowly. He walked over to the steel frame and ran a hand along the smooth, rust-free surface. It hummed under his touch, resonating with the latent power of the salvage. You're not a leader, Vale, he said quietly.
I don't think you'll ever be one. You don't have the presence. You don't have the charisma. I didn't ask to lead. Good.
Kale replied. He turned back to face him.
Because if you tried, I'd break your legs before you got 10 steps away. But right now, we need what you have. We need water. We need food that doesn't rot in 2 days. We need walls that don't fall down.
Sarah looked between them, incredulous.
You're listening to him. He's a freak, a glitch in the system. He's useful.
He walked back to Ethan and extended a hand. He didn't take it. Instead, he picked up a small, twisted piece of metal from his pack, a salvaged gear mechanism from an old clock tower. He placed it on the table between them.
This is a mana conduit.
It was broken for 50 years. Now it's whole. If you attach it to your weapon, it